There are infinite ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to arrive from another universe entirely. Today's story asks a question that should never have an answer. What happens when the Dark Lord of the Sith steps into a galaxy that makes his empire look merciful? The warp does not forgive. It does not forget. And on this day, above the agri-world of Vandis Prime, it did something far worse. It remembered something that had never existed in this reality at all. The tear manifested at 0847 hours Imperial Standard, a wound in space that screamed with colors that had no names. The orbital defense monitors registered it immediately, their machine spirits wailing in binary horror as reality folded inward like parchment held too close to flame. Captain Helios of the Imperial Navy frigate Unshakable Resolve watched his tactical display dissolve into static and reformed into patterns that hurt to perceive. "Get me a clear reading," he barked at his auger operators, but they were already convulsing in their neural interface cradles, blood streaming from their eye sockets. Something was coming through. The rift pulsed once, twice, and then vomited forth a vessel that had no right to exist. It was wedge-shaped, brutally efficient in its geometry, covered in armor plating that reflected the warp's madness like a dark mirror. No Imperial shipwright had ever conceived such architecture. No human mind from this galaxy had dreamed those angles. For 3 heartbeats, the alien craft hung in the void, systems sparking and dying as warp energy cooked its interior. Then it began to fall, tumbling through Vandis Prime's atmosphere like a black dagger thrown by an angry god. Captain Helios never got to report what he'd seen. The warp rift collapsed with such violence that it took the Unshakable Resolve and her entire crew into the Immaterium, their souls screaming into silence before they even understood they were dying. On the surface of Vandis Prime, in the agricultural settlement of Salvation's Rest, Commissar Davan Cross was conducting morning inspections when the sky caught fire. He'd served in the 47th Vandis Regiment for 23 years, survived 4 campaigns against Orc invasions, and never once flinched in the face of the Emperor's enemies. But when that burning star began its descent toward the northern grain fields, something cold and primal wrapped around his spine. "Sound general quarters," he ordered, his voice steady despite the dread pooling in his gut. "Get every able-bodied guardsman to the northern perimeter. Whatever's in that craft, it dies before sunset." Around him, the settlement erupted into disciplined chaos. Laser guns were distributed, ammunition stockpiles cracked open, and chimera transports roared to life. The 47th Vandis weren't frontline shock troops, but they were professional soldiers who knew their duty. 300 men and women formed up in textbook defensive positions, watching the black ship carve a burning trench through 6 kilometers of wheat fields before finally grinding to a halt. Cross raised his magnoculars and studied the wreckage. The vessel was massive up close, easily the size of a small Imperial shuttle, but its design language was utterly foreign. Smooth, dark metal, strange angular viewports, and along one pristine section of hull, symbols that looked almost like low Gothic, but twisted into unfamiliar configurations. "Sir," Lieutenant Veros appeared at his elbow, her usually confident voice tight with uncertainty. "The Vox is going insane. High Command wants a full report. The Mechanicus is demanding we secure the site. And..." She hesitated. "Sir, the astropaths are screaming. All of them. Simultaneously." Cross lowered his magnoculars. 23 years of service had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was howling at him to call for orbital bombardment and turn that crash site into glass. But orders were orders, and the Imperium did not waste potential technology, no matter how Xenos it appeared. "We advance," he said. "Standard sweep formation, meltagons to the front. If anything moves inside that hull, I want it atomized before it takes a second breath." The 47th moved out across the scorched earth, their boots crunching on carbonized wheat stalks. The wind had died completely, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Cross could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, steady and loud, counting down to something terrible. They were 50 meters from the crashed vessel when the hull breached. Not exploded, not opened, breached. A section of armored plating simply crumpled inward with a screech of tortured metal, folded like paper by invisible hands, and thrown aside with contemptuous force. From the smoking wound in the ship's side, a figure emerged. 7 feet tall, armor black as the void between stars, gleaming with a mirror finish that seemed to drink in the light. A helmet that was all brutal angles and a respirator grill that cycled with mechanical breathing, rhythmic, inevitable, like the heartbeat of something that refused to die. A cape that moved wrong in the still air, as if stirred by winds from another dimension entirely. And in the figure's hand, hanging loose and ready, was a cylinder of metal and dark crystal. Commissar Cross had faced orcs in melee. He'd stared down chaos cultists without flinching. But when those lenses in that mask turned toward him, black, reflective, utterly devoid of mercy or doubt, he felt something he'd never experienced in 2 decades of warfare. He felt like prey. In the Emperor's name, Cross raised his bolt pistol, his voice carrying across the wheat field. "Identify yourself." The figure in black armor tilted its head slightly, processing the words. When it spoke, the voice was deep, mechanically enhanced, and layered with such absolute authority that 3 guardsmen actually lowered their weapons reflexively. "Where?" the voice demanded, each word a pronouncement of dark judgment. "Is my master?" And then Darth Vader ignited his lightsaber, and Vandis Prime learned that there were worse things in the galaxy than the enemies they already knew. The crimson blade ignited with a sound that had never before echoed in the 41st millennium, a snap hiss that spoke of contained power and barely restrained fury. The weapon hummed with an energy that made the air vibrate, casting blood-red shadows across the scorched wheat field. Commissar Cross had a split second to register that the blade was pure energy, impossibly contained without a power field generator, before his training overrode his shock. "Fire!" he roared. "Emperor, guide your aim." 300 laser guns opened up simultaneously. The air turned white-hot with coherent light, las bolts converging on the black-armored figure in a disciplined storm of Imperial firepower. At this range, massed laser gun fire could cut through ceramite plate, could reduce a charging orc mob to smoking meat. The 47th Vandis were veterans, and their volleys were textbook perfect. Darth Vader raised his left hand. The las bolts stopped, simply stopped, frozen in the air 3 meters from his position, hundreds of energy beams hanging suspended like fireflies trapped in amber. The guardsmen kept firing, their laser guns screaming on full automatic, but every bolt met that invisible wall and hung there, building into a constellation of deadly light that illuminated the Dark Lord like a crimson star. "Impossible," Lieutenant Veros whispered. "That's not a power field. That's not any technology." Vader made a pushing motion with his palm. The suspended las bolts reversed course. What happened next would be reported in 17 different after-action reports, each trying to explain the inexplicable. The first rank of guardsmen simply ceased to exist, atomized by their own reflected fire. The second rank fared no better. Men and women who'd survived years of warfare were cut down by las bolts that moved with unnatural precision, seeking center mass with mechanical efficiency. In 3 seconds, the 47th Vandis lost 40 soldiers. Cross emptied his bolt pistol at the advancing figure, the mass-reactive rounds exploding against that same invisible barrier in flowers of fire and shrapnel. Nothing touched the black armor. Nothing even came close. "Melter-guns!" Cross screamed, diving behind a Chimera transport as another wave of reflected las fire scythed overhead. "Concentrated fire, pattern delta!" The melter operators were professionals. They'd cracked open orc battle wagons, reduced bunkers to slag, melted through reinforced blast doors. The 3 fusion beams that lanced toward Vader carried enough thermal energy to vaporize a small building. The Dark Lord gestured, and the nearest chimera, 12 tons of armored personnel carrier, lifted off the ground and interposed itself between Vader and the melter beams. The beams punched through the transport's armor like tissue paper, turning its interior into a furnace and cooking the crew alive in their stations. Then Vader threw the chimera. The transport flew backward with impossible velocity, crushing 2 squads and scattering the defensive line like toys. Guardsmen scrambled away from the wreckage, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. These were soldiers trained to hold against overwhelming odds, but this wasn't a battle. This was something else entirely. Vader advanced, his lightsaber held low in a guard position, his breathing a mechanical rhythm that seemed to count down to their deaths. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd fought armies before and found them wanting. Cross pulled a frag grenade from his webbing, primed it, and hurled it with all his strength. The grenade arced through the air, its trajectory perfect, and froze 2 meters from Vader's chest, hanging in the air like the last bolts before it. The Commissar watched in numb horror as Vader's hand clenched into a fist, and the grenade compressed. The mechanism inside detonated prematurely, but the explosion never escaped the invisible grip. It simply collapsed inward, consumed by forces Cross had no reference for. "Psyker!" someone screamed. "He's a bloody psyker!" That single word changed everything. If this was a psyker, they had protocols. Desperate, suicidal protocols, but protocols nonetheless. Cross grabbed his Vox unit, his hands slick with sweat. "This is Commissar Cross to High Command. Authentication code Sigma 77. Unsanctioned psycho manifestation, combat grade power level. Requesting immediate Astartes deployment and possible exterminatus preparation." His words cut off as an invisible hand wrapped around his throat, not touching him, just pressure, building with inexorable force. Cross dropped the Vox unit and clawed at his neck, but there was nothing there to fight, nothing to resist. His vision began to gray at the edges. Vader lifted him off the ground with a casual gesture, studying the Commissar like a specimen. The respirator continued its rhythmic breathing, calm and unhurried, despite the chaos surrounding them. "You speak of an emperor." Vader's voice resonated with dark curiosity. "Where is your emperor? Where is this Imperium you serve?" Cross tried to spit defiance, but his crushed windpipe wouldn't allow it. His vision was fading, darkness closing in, and in that darkness he saw the Emperor's light growing distant. Vader released him. The Commissar crashed to the ground, gasping, his throat bruised but intact. Vader had held back, had chosen not to kill. That realization was somehow more terrifying than the display of power. "You will take me to your leaders," Vader commanded. It wasn't a request or even an order. It was a statement of inevitable fact. "You will explain this galaxy to me. You will tell me how I came to be here, and how I return to my master." Behind him, the remaining soldiers of the 47th Vandis had their weapons trained on the Dark Lord, but nobody was firing. They'd learned that lesson. Cross could see it in their eyes, the understanding that they were utterly, completely outmatched. "And if we refuse?" Cross managed to rasp, his loyalty to the Emperor overriding his survival instinct. Vader's helmet turned, surveying the burning chimera, the scattered bodies, the broken defensive line. When he spoke again, there was something almost like disappointment in that mechanical voice. "Then you will join the others who have underestimated the power of the dark side," he said. "I have destroyed entire rebel fleets. I have broken Jedi masters. I have brought systems to heel with nothing but my presence and my lightsaber. You are soldiers, and you fought with discipline. I respect that, but your weapons cannot harm me, and your Emperor, whoever he is, does not protect you from the Force. The word meant nothing to any of them. Force. In Low Gothic, it sounded like violence, like momentum, like inevitable consequence. They had no context for what Vader truly meant, no understanding that they faced something from beyond their reality entirely. Lieutenant Veros, blood streaming from a shrapnel wound on her forehead, stepped forward despite Cross's warning gesture. She saluted crisply, her lasgun at her side. "Sir," she addressed Vader with parade ground formality, "we are servants of the God Emperor of mankind, master of the Imperium of Man. The Imperium spanning 1,000,000 worlds. You have slain his soldiers. By law and faith, you are hereby condemned as heretic and psyker. But," she swallowed hard, "but we lack the strength to enforce that sentence. We request parley under terms of military necessity." It was the smartest thing anyone could have said. Admit defeat without surrendering honor. Acknowledge the power differential. Create a framework for negotiation. Cross felt a surge of pride in his lieutenant, even as he contemplated how they'd all face execution for treating with an unsanctioned psyker. Vader considered this for a long moment, his respirator marking time. Then he deactivated his lightsaber, the crimson blade vanishing with a hiss. "I accept your parley," he said. "Take me to someone who understands what has happened. Take me to someone with knowledge of dimensional breaches, of reality rifts, of..." He paused, as if tasting a foreign word. "The warp." Every guardsman within earshot went pale. This Xenos, this demon, this thing, whatever it was, knew about the warp, had named it directly, without ritual protection or sanctified wards. Commissar Cross realized with dawning dread that this wasn't just a psycho manifestation or a minor Xenos incursion. This was the beginning of something far, far worse. The Vox network across Vandis Prime exploded with encrypted transmissions within minutes of the failed engagement. Commissar Cross's distress call had been brief, professional, and absolutely terrifying. Unsanctioned psyker, combat-grade manifestation, hostile Xenos technology, mass casualties, situation contained but critical. On the orbital station Vigil's Eye, Inquisitor Carmela Vex of the Ordo Malleus received the transmission in her private sanctum. She was a thin woman, severe in her grey body glove and red inquisitorial robes, with augmetic eyes that glowed a soft amber in the dim light. For 40 years she had hunted demon hosts, rogue psykers, and chaos corruption across the Segmentum Obscurus. She had personally overseen the execution of 12 planetary governors and authorized exterminatus on 3 worlds, too corrupted to save. She read Cross's report 3 times, then activated her direct Vox link to the Hammer of Purity, the Malleus strike cruiser holding position at the system's edge. "This is Inquisitor Vex, Authority Code Crimson Omega 7, she spoke into the encrypted channel. "I am invoking emergency protocols. Deploy Interrogator Matthias and full tactical support to Vandis Prime. Crash site coordinates attached. Rules of engagement. Observe, assess, contain. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." The voice that responded was young, but steady. "Understood, Inquisitor. What exactly are we containing?" Vex stared at the data slate, at the descriptions that made no sense. A suit of powered armor that moved like nothing in Imperial records. Energy weapons with no detectable power source. Telekinetic abilities that exceeded anything outside of Alpha Plus Psyker classification. And most disturbing, the figure had asked about dimensional breaches and spoken the word warp as if it were common vocabulary, not forbidden knowledge. "Something that shouldn't exist," she said finally. "Move fast, Interrogator. If this is a warp manifestation wearing technology as camouflage, we may have hours before demonic corruption spreads." She cut the link and turned to her personal archive, fingers dancing across runic keyboards as she accessed files sealed by the highest authority. There were precedents for this, buried in texts that most Inquisitors never saw. Stories of the Halo stars, where reality grew thin. Accounts from the War of the Beast, when something had torn holes between dimensions. Fragments of pre-imperial lore describing visitors from other skies. The Imperium's official doctrine was that such things were impossible, heresies invented by madmen and traitors. But Vex had seen impossible things before. She'd watched a saint manifest on Coralia 4, had personally bound a greater demon on Typhon's Reach. The galaxy was vast and strange, and the warp did not obey mortal logic. If something had truly arrived from outside their reality, it would either be the Imperium's salvation or its damnation. There was never a middle ground with the unknown. On the surface, Darth Vader stood in the center of Salvation's Rest's main square, surrounded by 400 terrified guardsmen and civilians who'd been given the order to maintain observation distance. He had not moved in 37 minutes, hadn't spoken, hadn't even shifted his weight. He simply stood there, a statue of black armor and menace, his respirator the only sound in the unnaturally quiet settlement. Commissar Cross watched from behind a sandbagged position, his bolt pistol loaded but holstered. Every instinct screamed at him to give the order, to have his men open fire again, to die honorably rather than tolerate this abomination's presence. But Veros had been right. They couldn't hurt it, and it had shown restraint when it could have slaughtered them all. That restraint was the only reason Cross was still breathing, and he hated that fact with every fiber of his being. "Sir," Veros appeared at his elbow, keeping her voice low. "Perimeter sensors just picked up an inbound shuttle. Inquisitorial markings. They'll be here in 8 minutes. Thank the Emperor. If anyone could handle this nightmare, it was the Inquisition." Cross had only met an Inquisitor once, during a Chaos cult purge on his homeworld. The woman had terrified him more than any enemy he'd ever faced, but she'd also saved 17 million lives by rooting out corruption before it spread. "Keep all personnel at maximum distance," Cross ordered. "Nobody approaches, nobody provokes. When the Inquisition arrives, we defer completely to their authority." "Sir, what is that thing?" Veros asked quietly. "I've read the tactical manuals, studied every Xenos threat classification. That's not Eldar witchcraft, not Orc weird boy powers, not even close to the descriptions of Chaos sorcery. It's something else entirely." Cross had been thinking the same thing. The creature, he couldn't think of it as a man despite the humanoid shape, had demonstrated powers that exceeded anything in Imperial records. But there was something methodical about its approach, something almost imperial in its efficiency and authority. "Maybe it's from the dark age of technology," Cross suggested, grasping for explanations. "Some lost colony that developed differently, separated from humanity for millennia." "It asked about its master," Veros interrupted. "It serves someone, something, and it expected to find them here." That was the detail that kept circling in Cross's mind. The creature wasn't a mindless beast or a chaos-maddened psyker. It was a servant, possibly a soldier, definitely someone accustomed to command and obedience, which meant somewhere, somehow, there was something even more powerful than this black-armored monster. That thought made Cross's blood run cold. The Inquisitorial shuttle screamed down from orbit, its engines howling with barely contained power. It was a sleek craft, painted in the red and black of the Ordo Malleus, bristling with weapons and scanner arrays. It didn't land so much as crash to a hover 3 meters above the square, its weapons immediately locking onto Vader's position. The boarding ramp slammed down, and Interrogator Matthias descended with 6 combat servitors at his back. He was a mountain of a man, easily matching Vader's height, wearing inquisitorial power armor blessed with more purity seals than Cross had ever seen. His face was scarred from acid burns, his augmetic left arm ending in a power fist that crackled with disruptor energy. "I am Interrogator Matthias of the Ordo Malleus," speaking with the voice and authority of the God Emperor himself. His voice boomed across the square, amplified by vox speakers. You will identify yourself, state your origin, and explain your presence on this world. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination and soul binding. Vader's helmet turned toward the newcomer. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. Then Vader spoke, his mechanical voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I am Lord Vader, right hand of Emperor Palpatine, supreme commander of the Imperial fleet, and enforcer of Imperial law across 1,000 systems. He took a single step forward, and every weapon in the square tracked him. I answer to my master alone. You will explain what has happened, how I arrived in this place, and you will provide me transport to your emperor so that I may negotiate terms of my return. Matthias's scarred face twisted into something between a snarl and a laugh. Your emperor. There is only one emperor, Xenos, the god emperor of mankind, master of the Imperium, who sits upon the golden throne and lights our way through darkness. And you. His power fist sparked with building energy. You are an abomination, a psyker unbound by law, a threat to every soul on this world. I am no abomination, Vader's voice carried absolute certainty. I am what I was made to be, a weapon, a tool, a dark mirror to those who claim righteousness. He gestured to the surrounding guardsmen, the ruined chimera, the scorched earth. These soldiers attacked without provocation. I defended myself with restraint. I have killed no one who did not fire upon me first. Is that the action of your demon? It was a fair point, and Cross could see it landing. Matthias hesitated, his combat doctrines warring with the evidence before him. Demons didn't negotiate. Chaos didn't show mercy. Xenos didn't reference imperial law and chain of command. You speak of emperors and imperiums, Matthias said slowly, his power fist still raised but no longer charging. You carry technology that violates 12 Mechanicus principles. You wield powers that should mark you for execution. Yet you stand here, speaking reason, requesting dialogue. He took a step closer, his augmetic eyes scanning Vader with suspicious intensity. What are you? Vader's respirator cycled twice before he answered. When he spoke, there was something almost like weariness in that mechanical voice. I am a man who has lost everything, he said quietly. My wife, my children, my identity, my very galaxy, it seems. I served an empire that brought order to chaos, that ended 1,000 years of war, that united a galaxy under one rule. His fist clenched at his side. And now I find myself here, in a place where reality itself feels wrong, surrounded by soldiers who worship their emperor as a god and wield weapons I've never encountered. So I ask again, interrogator, what has happened to me? The honesty in that statement cut through Cross's hatred like a monomolecular blade. For the first time, he saw past the armor and the power to something recognizable. A soldier lost in enemy territory, trying to understand a situation that exceeded his experience. It didn't make the creature less dangerous, but it made him comprehensible. Matthias must have seen it too, because his power fist powered down with a reluctant whine. You're coming with me, the interrogator said. Inquisitor Vex will determine what you are and whether you live or die. If you resist, I will activate every weapon on this shuttle and reduce you to constituent atoms. If you cooperate, he paused, you may yet see your emperor, though I promise you, he is not the one you serve. Vader considered this, his helmet tilting slightly. Then he walked toward the shuttle, his cape moving in that wrong way, his presence a weight that made every soul in the square want to flee. Lead on, Vader said simply. I will meet your Inquisitor. I will answer her questions, and then we will see which Imperium proves stronger. As the shuttle lifted off, Commissar Cross finally allowed himself to breathe. The creature was gone. Now someone else's problem. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Vandis Prime had just witnessed the opening move in a game whose rules nobody understood. And in games like that, entire worlds became expendable pieces. The Vigil's eye station hung in high orbit like a Gothic cathedral cast in adamantium and faith. Its corridors were narrow, lined with skulls and purity seals, lit by flickering lumen strips that cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. Servo skulls drifted through the recycled air, their eye lenses recording everything, their embedded Vox units whispering prayers to the machine god. Darth Vader walked those corridors, flanked by Interrogator Matthias and 12 combat servitors, their weapons trained on him with unwavering precision. He studied everything, the architecture, the technology, the religious iconography that covered every surface. This Imperium was different from the one he knew. Where Palpatine's empire had been cold and efficient, this one was fervent, fanatical. Every bolt, every rivet, every data port was inscribed with prayers and benedictions. It reminded him of the Jedi Temple, actually. That same absolute certainty, that unshakable belief in a higher purpose. He'd burned one temple already. Perhaps he'd need to burn another. "You're remarkably calm for someone being brought before the Inquisition," Matthias observed, his augmetic eyes never leaving Vader. "Most heretics and Xenos beg or threaten by now." "I have stood before emperors and Sith lords," Vader replied, his respirator marking steady time. "I have been judged by beings who could annihilate worlds with a thought. Your Inquisitor does not frighten me." "She should," Matthias said flatly. "Inquisitor Vex has ended dynasties, purged entire subsectors, condemned billions to save trillions. If she believes you're a threat, she will kill you without hesitation or regret. And if you are tainted by chaos..." He let the sentence hang. Vader turned his helmet toward the interrogator. "This chaos you keep mentioning. Explain it." Matthias actually hesitated, his scarred face twisting in what might have been surprise. "You don't know. You spoke the word warp as if you understood." "I know the warp," Vader interrupted. "I felt it when I arrived. A dimension of energy, raw and violent, pressing against reality like an infection. Similar to the dark side of the Force, but louder, hungrier, more aware." His fist clenched. "Something touched my mind during the transition. Multiple somethings, actually. They whispered promises, offered power, tried to burrow into my thoughts like parasites." Every servitor in the corridor locked weapons. Matthias's power fist ignited with a crackle of energy, and somewhere behind armor plating, automated defense turrets swiveled into position. "You were touched by the ruinous powers." Matthias's voice had gone cold and deadly. "And you're still standing here, speaking coherently, showing no signs of corruption. That's impossible. Nobody resists chaos contact without sanctified protection, without the Emperor's light, without..." "I am protected by something far older than your Emperor," Vader said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "The dark side of the Force has claimed me completely. There is no room in my soul for other masters. I am Palpatine's creature, body and spirit. Whatever your chaos wanted, it found territory already conquered." The logic was twisted but sound, and Matthias could see it. One corruption recognizing another, refusing to share its host. The interrogator filed that information away. Inquisitor Vex would need to hear it directly. They reached the sanctum door, a massive portal of blackened steel inscribed with wards that made Vader's armor hum with responding energy. Matthias placed his hand on the gene lock scanner, and the door ground open with pneumatic hisses. The chamber beyond was circular, 30 meters across, with a domed ceiling painted with scenes of the Emperor's glory. At the room's center stood a woman in gray and red, her augmetic eyes glowing as she studied a hololith display showing Vader's arrival, the crash site, the battle with the guardsmen. "Inquisitor Vex," Matthias announced formally. "I present the entity self-identified as Lord Vader." Vader stepped into the chamber, and the door sealed behind him with a final, ominous clang. He was alone with the Inquisitor now. The servitors remained outside, though he had no doubt the room was filled with hidden weapons. Vex turned to face him, and Vader felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine interest from someone studying him as a puzzle rather than a threat. Her augmetic eyes were scanning him at multiple wavelengths, probably analyzing everything from his armor's composition to his respiratory patterns. "Lord Vader," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "An interesting title. Lord of what, precisely?" "The Sith," Vader replied simply, "though that word likely means nothing to you." "No," Vex admitted, "it doesn't. But your armor tells a story, your weapons tell another, and your presence," she gestured to the air around him. "You create a pressure in the warp, a weight that shouldn't exist. You're not a psyker in any conventional sense. Your power doesn't draw from the immaterium the way ours does. It's self-contained, internalized, like a black hole pulling everything inward." Vader was impressed, despite himself. This woman understood more in 30 seconds than most Force users learned in years of training. "I draw power from the Force," he explained, "the energy field that binds all living things. It has two aspects, the light, which the Jedi worship, and the dark, which the Sith have mastered. I am purely dark side now. Everything I was before died on Mustafar." "Mustafar," Vex repeated, accessing her mental archives. "Not a world in any Imperial records. You're from outside our galaxy, aren't you? Not Xenos, not human from a lost colony, but genuinely alien in the most fundamental sense." "I am human," Vader corrected sharply. "Or I was. Before Kenobi left me burning, before Palpatine rebuilt me into this." He gestured to his armor, his cybernetics, his mechanical existence. "Now, I'm something else, a weapon shaped for a specific purpose." Vex circled him slowly, her robes whispering against the floor. "And what purpose is that?" "To hunt Jedi, to enforce Imperial law, to be the dark fear that keeps rebellion in check." Vader's respirator cycled. "I am what happens when righteousness fails, when the Republic collapses into chaos, when good men prove insufficient to save civilization. I am the monster that order requires." There was a long silence. Vex stopped circling and stood directly before him, her augmetic eyes locked on his mask. "I understand you," she said quietly. "More than you know. The Inquisition exists for the same reason, to do the things that decent people cannot stomach, to make the choices that saints refuse, to burn the diseased flesh so that healthy tissue might survive. We are not loved. We are not celebrated. We are feared and hated and absolutely necessary." Vader studied her through his lenses. In another life, in another galaxy, this woman might have made an excellent Sith Inquisitor. She had the coldness, the clarity of purpose, the willingness to sacrifice anything for her ideology. "Then you understand why I must return to my master," Vader said. "The Empire requires my service. Without me, rebels grow bold. Jedi survivors spread their poison, and order fragments into chaos. I am a pillar supporting civilization. My absence weakens everything I've built." "Your master is not here," Vex said gently, as if explaining death to a child. "Your empire doesn't exist in this reality. You traveled through the warp, Lord Vader, and the warp does not respect geography or even causality. You may be in another galaxy, another time, or another dimension entirely. There may be no way back." The respirator's rhythm increased slightly, the only sign that Vader was processing this horror, trapped, separated from Palpatine, from his purpose, from everything that defined his existence. He was a weapon locked in a room where nothing needed killing, a tool designed for a war that wasn't being fought. "Unacceptable," Vader said flatly. "There must be a way. Your warp brought me here. It can return me. You have psychers, navigators, warp travel. You understand dimensional transit. Help me return, and I will owe your Imperium a debt. Refuse. He let the threat hang. Threaten me again, Vex said, her voice still soft but now edged with absolute steel. And I will activate the weapon systems built into this chamber and reduce you to your component atoms. You're powerful, Lord Vader. Perhaps powerful enough to kill me before you die, but I've spent 40 years fighting things that make you look pedestrian. Your threats bore me. Vader's hand drifted toward his lightsaber, then stopped. She was right. He could feel the systems around him, dormant, but ready. Meltagons in the walls, plasma turrets in the ceiling, probably some kind of psychic dampening field generator as well. This room was designed to contain and kill beings far more dangerous than him. He forced his hand to relax, drew on decades of discipline to master his frustration. Then let us discuss this as professionals, Vader said. You want information about my capabilities, my technology, my force powers. I want information about the warp, about navigation in this reality, about potential methods of dimensional transit. We can trade knowledge. We can help each other. Vex smiled, and it was the first time her expression had changed. Now you're thinking like an Inquisitor. Very well. I have questions, and you will answer them truthfully. In exchange, I will provide access to our archives, explain how warp travel functions, and perhaps, help you find a way home. She gestured to a chair that rose from the floor with pneumatic hisses. Sit. This will take hours. And Lord Vader, if I detect any lie, any deception, any hint that you've been corrupted by chaos or serve the ruinous powers, this conversation ends with your execution. Vader lowered himself into the chair, his armor whirring with servo motors. Through the Force, he could feel the Inquisitor's determination, her curiosity, and beneath both, a tiny flicker of fear. She was terrified of him, of what he represented, of the implications of his existence. Good. Fear was honest. Fear kept people sharp. Ask your questions, Vader said. I have nothing to hide. I am exactly what I appear to be, a servant of order, a weapon forged in darkness, a necessary evil. His respirator cycled once. Much like you, Inquisitor Vex. And so began the interrogation that would reshape both their understandings of power, corruption, and the thin line between necessary evil and absolute damnation. On the forge world of Metallus 9, 300 light-years from Vandis Prime, Magos Dominus Xerxes 7 received a data packet that made his dozen mechadendrites freeze in mid-motion. The encrypted burst had come through inquisitorial channels, marked with priority codes that overrode even Fabricator General directives. The message was brief: Xenotech recovery, unknown origin, potentially STC adjacent. Your presence required, coordinates attached, STC adjacent, standard template construct adjacent. Those 3 words could justify any expense, any sacrifice, any risk. The STCs were humanity's holy grail, complete manufacturing databases from the dark age of technology, containing the knowledge to build everything from basic agricultural equipment to galaxy-spanning warships. The Mechanicus had spent 10,000 years searching for intact STCs, finding only fragments, corrupted data shards, partial schematics. If the Inquisition had found something even remotely related to STC technology, Xerxes 7 would crawl through hell itself to examine it. 16 hours later, his personal transport settled onto Vandis Prime's scorched wheat fields. The Magos emerged in a cloud of incense and binary cant, his crimson robes covering a body that was more machine than flesh. His face was a silver skull with glowing optical sensors, his hands replaced by precision manipulators designed for microsurgery and macro-engineering both. Interrogator Matthias met him at the crash site, now surrounded by defense walls and automated turrets. The wreckage of Vader's vessel sat in the center like a black jewel, untouched and unmolested. "Magos," Matthias greeted with a curt nod. "The Inquisitor requests you examine this craft before we transport the occupant's armor for analysis. She wants to understand the technology before we make any decisions about the entity itself." Xerxes VII's optical sensors focused on the ship, and his internal cogitators began processing the visual data. The hull material was unknown, not Imperial steel, not Xenos composite, something else entirely. The energy signatures were dormant but detectable, suggesting power systems still functional despite the catastrophic crash. "I require full access." Xerxes VII's voice was mechanically synthesized, each word precisely modulated. "No restrictions. The Omnissiah's mysteries must be unveiled without interference." Matthias gestured to the breached hull section where Vader had emerged. "It's all yours, Magos, but be careful. We don't know if there are automated defenses or cogitator spirits that might activate." The Magos approached with reverence, his mechadendrites extending like the legs of a steel spider. When his manipulators touched the hull, he gasped, an actual organic response that surprised him. The metal was cold, perfectly smooth, and resonated with a molecular structure that his sensors insisted was impossible. Too dense, too precisely aligned, manufactured at a level of perfection that exceeded even Mechanicus' capabilities. He climbed through the breach into the ship's interior, and his world changed. The bridge was small, designed for a single pilot, but every surface was covered in technology that made Xerxes VII's biological heart, what remained of it, beat faster. Control systems with no visible power conduits. Display screens showing data in a language that wasn't Low Gothic, High Gothic, or any Xenos script in Mechanicus archives. Navigation equipment that suggested FTL travel, but not through the warp, through something called hyperspace, according to the still active readouts. "Omnissiah preserve me," Xerxes VII whispered, reverting to organic speech in his shock. "This is not STC. This is something better. This is proof." "Proof of what?" Matthias called from outside. "That humanity evolved differently elsewhere." Xerxes VII's excitement manifested as clicking binary bursts. "That our Imperium is not unique. That other branches of the human species developed along different technological paths. This vessel operates on principles adjacent to our understanding, but divergent in execution. It's like finding a cousin you never knew existed, who speaks a different language, but whose features mirror your own." He interfaced directly with the ship's computer core, his mechadendrites jacking into ports that accepted them despite being designed for different connectors. Data flooded his consciousness. Star charts showing a galaxy that wasn't theirs, historical records of something called the Galactic Empire, technical schematics for weapons and vehicles, and Emperor's mercy. Xerxes VII pulled back, his optics flickering with processing strain. The Death Star. They built a moon-sized battle station, powered by hypermatter reactors generating more energy than our largest forge worlds, capable of destroying planets with a single weapon discharge. "Impossible," Matthias said flatly. "Impossible for us," Xerxes VII corrected, "but they achieved it. I have the proof, Interrogator. This vessel's computer contains partial schematics, combat reports, maintenance logs from the Death Star's operation, and it was commanded by..." He accessed the relevant files. "Emperor Palpatine's enforcer, Lord Vader, the entity currently in Inquisitor Vex's custody." Matthias felt cold certainty settle in his gut. If Vader came from a civilization that could build planet killers, if he was the right hand of an emperor who controlled such weapons, then they were dealing with something far beyond a simple psycho manifestation or Xenos incursion. "Can you extract the data?" Matthias asked. "Everything. Ship design, weapons technology, power generation, FTL methods." "I can try," Xerxes VII's mechadendrites were already weaving through the ship's systems, copying everything his cogitators could process. But interrogator, you must understand, this technology is built on principles we've forgotten or never discovered. Their power generation uses contained plasma in ways we'd consider tech heresy. Their computing systems exceed our most sacred cogitators in processing power. Their propulsion doesn't touch the warp at all. Is that possible? FTL without the warp? According to these logs, yes. They punch through into an alternate dimension they call hyperspace, not the immaterium, something else entirely. Faster than warp travel, more predictable, without the need for navigators or Geller fields. Xerxes VII's voice carried wonder and horror. They traveled the stars without ever touching chaos, without ever knowing it existed. That fact landed like a thunderbolt. The Imperium's greatest weakness was its dependence on warp travel, on psychers and navigators, on the constant risk of demonic incursion. But Vader's people had bypassed all of that. They'd found another way. The Inquisitor needs to know this immediately. Matthias activated his Vox link. Inquisitor Vex, priority transmission. The xenotech analysis reveals the entity's origin possesses FTL technology independent of warp travel. Potential strategic implications are significant. Back in the sanctum aboard Vigil's Eye, Vex received the transmission while sitting across from Vader. She'd been questioning him for 6 hours straight, learning about the Force, about Sith philosophy, about his personal history. And now this, confirmation that his claims were accurate, that he truly did come from another human civilization entirely. "Lord Vader," she said carefully, "my Mechanicus representative has accessed your ship's computer. He reports technology far exceeding our current capabilities. Planet-destroying weapons, FTL travel without warp exposure, energy generation beyond our Forge world's output. Is this accurate?" Vader's respirator cycled thoughtfully. The Death Star was the Empire's masterwork, a statement of absolute power designed to end rebellion through fear. One base, one weapon, capable of rendering entire worlds lifeless. It worked until rebels destroyed it through sabotage. How did they destroy it? Thermal exhaust port, a design flaw exploited by a former apprentice of mine. Vader's fist clenched. Obi-Wan's final student. The boy I should have found and eliminated before he became dangerous. Vex's augmetic eyes studied him. She'd heard that tone before. Not anger, but regret. Vader blamed himself for the Death Star's destruction, carried that failure like a physical weight. "If you possessed such power," Vex asked, "why did you serve your Emperor? You could have ruled in his place." "I tried once," Vader admitted quietly. "I begged my wife to join me, to help me overthrow Palpatine and rule the galaxy together. She refused, chose the Jedi, chose Kenobi." His hand drifted unconsciously to his chest. "I force-choked her in my rage. Palpatine told me I killed her. Told me my child died with her. He lied about both, but I believed him for 20 years. So you serve him out of..." Vex searched for the word. "Habit. Inertia. I serve him because I have nothing else," Vader said with brutal honesty. "My wife is dead, truly dead now. My son rejected me, chose to die rather than turn to the dark side. The Jedi are extinct by my hand. The Republic I tried to save is ashes. All that remains is the Empire, and I am its right hand, its dark enforcer, its necessary evil. Without that purpose, I am simply empty." Vex understood that emptiness. She'd felt it herself in the quiet moments between missions, when the weight of her decisions threatened to crush her. The Inquisition gave her purpose, justified her existence, transformed her atrocities into necessary sacrifices. Without it, she'd be just another murderer with delusions of righteousness. "The Mechanicus wants your technology," she said bluntly. "Wants to dissect your ship, reverse engineer your weapons, Understand your FTL drives. If we could replicate warp-free travel, we could end humanity's dependence on navigators, reduce chaos exposure, expand the Imperium without limits. Then help me return, Vader countered. Give me a functioning ship, provide coordinates to the nearest warp rift, and I will open diplomatic channels between our Imperiums. Technology exchange, military alliance, knowledge sharing. Your Emperor and mine could carve this galaxy between us. It was a tempting offer, terrifyingly tempting. But Vex had seen too much corruption, witnessed too many tainted bargains, to accept it without reservations. Your master, she said carefully, this Emperor Palpatine. What is he? Human? Enhanced? Something else? He is Sith, Vader replied. The most powerful Force user in galactic history. He can shoot lightning from his fingertips, can twist minds with a word, can foresee the future through the Force. He orchestrated the Clone Wars, manipulated both sides of a galactic conflict, destroyed the Jedi Order, and transformed a failing republic into an absolute empire. All in 20 years. Vex felt cold dread crystallize in her chest. He sounds like a chaos champion, like a servant of Tzeentch, god of scheming and sorcery. If your master came here, if he touched the warp directly, he would be corrupted, Vader finished. Yes, I understand now. The warp is not the Force. It is louder, hungrier, more aggressive. It seeks hosts, demands worship, offers power for a price. Palpatine would see it as a tool to be used, would think himself strong enough to resist. He would be wrong. So you cannot return, Vex said gently. Not safely, because bringing your master here would doom both our civilizations. Vader sat in silence, his respirator the only sound. She was right. He knew she was right. Palpatine would consume the warp's power like a man dying of thirst, drinking poison, would become something worse than any chaos champion, would burn through the Imperium like a forest fire, and Vader, weapon without a master, would be left with no purpose at all. Then what do I do? The question was quiet, vulnerable, entirely unlike the Dark Lord who'd slaughtered his way across countless worlds. What is a weapon supposed to do when the war is over? Inquisitor Vex smiled, and it wasn't cruel. It was understanding. You find a new war, she said, and Lord Vader in the 41st millennium. There are more wars than stars in the sky. 3 days after Vader's arrival, Inquisitor Vex stood before a hololith display showing 17 active war zones. Vader studied them with a commander's eye, recognizing the patterns of overstretched forces and unwinnable attrition. That system, he pointed to a red marker. Golus 9, you've marked it for Exterminatus. Why? Genestealer infestation. 8 billion compromised at the genetic level. Better to kill them now than let a Tyranid hive fleet consume them in 6 months. 8 billion people murdered on suspicion. On certainty, Vex corrected coldly. Tell me you never made similar calculations. Vader was silent. He'd destroyed Alderaan, 2 billion dead to demonstrate the Death Star's power. I understand the necessity. That doesn't make it right. The Exterminatus fleet departs in 6 hours. I'm observing. Join me. See how we wage final wars. Help us with this and other threats, and we'll research warp rifts, study dimensional transit, find you a way home. Vader felt the Force pushing toward acceptance, purpose, utility, a new war for a weapon without a master. Before he could answer, alarms shrieked through the station. Multiple warp signatures, a panicked voice reported. 9 contacts, Chaos vessels, Black Legion, heading for Vandis Prime. Through the viewport, Vader saw reality tear open. 9 massive ships emerged, gothic and corrupt, covered in spikes and mutations that hurt to perceive. They felt you. Vex's augmetic eyes locked onto him. Your arrival. They're here to investigate. Or claim me, Vader said grimly. Something touched my mind when I arrived, offered power. I refused. The dark gods don't take rejection well. Vex was already moving, fingers dancing across controls. Battle stations, all systems active. Evacuate Vandis Prime. Vader studied the tactical display. 9 Chaos vessels against 1 station and 3 escorts. Your defenses are designed for planetary threats, not fleet engagement. We're not a battle fleet, Vex said bitterly. We need to evacuate, call for reinforcements. No, Vader's voice carried absolute authority. You stay and fight. Running invites pursuit. Standing shows strength. We can't win. Winning is irrelevant. Surviving matters. Vader turned to face her. These Chaos ships rely on warp-spawned crew, raiders expecting easy prey. I board their flagship, kill their champion, and the rest scatter. That's suicide. Those vessels are crawling with Chaos Marines and demons. I have spent 20 years boarding enemy vessels and killing everyone inside. His fist clenched, and a nearby servitor's skull imploded from invisible pressure. Prepare a boarding torpedo, 1 seat, maximum velocity, aimed at their flagship. I will show them what true darkness looks like. Vex made her decision. Battle stations. Someone prep Lord Vader's insertion craft. Vader stood at the viewport, watching the Chaos ships approach. Through the Force, he felt thousands of twisted souls drunk on madness. They thought they were predators. He ignited his lightsaber, its crimson glow reflecting like a promise of blood. The Emperor protects, Vex whispered. Which one? Vader asked. Then he walked toward the hangar, toward the torpedo that would fire him at the heart of chaos itself. The boarding torpedo was a coffin with engines, 2 meters of reinforced adamantium designed to punch through enemy hulls at suicidal velocities. Magos Xerxes 7 had modified it in 18 minutes, adding stabilizers and reinforced the impact cage after witnessing Vader's demonstrations of telekinetic power. The machine spirit is agitated. Xerxes 7's mechadendrites twitched nervously as Vader climbed into the cramped interior. It has never carried something like you. The Omnissiah's blessing may not extend. Your machine spirit will obey or break, Vader interrupted, settling into the crash harness. I've mastered technologies your Omnissiah never dreamed of. This primitive missile is no different. The Magos's optical sensors flickered with what might have been offense, but he sealed the hatch without comment. Through the torpedo's single viewport, Vader watched the hangar bay crew scatter as the launch tube pressurized. In the command sanctum, Vex monitored 9 screens simultaneously. The Chaos fleet had spread into attack formation, 8 vessels forming a crescent, while their flagship, the despoiler's Fang, held position at the center. It was a massive battle barge, 3 kilometers of corrupted metal covered in brass icons and screaming faces that had once been hull plating. Flagship is hailing us, her communications officer reported. Audio only, extreme warp distortion. Put it through. The voice that emerged was layered, multiple tones speaking in perfect unison. It sounded male and female, young and ancient, human and utterly alien. Little Inquisitor, the voice crooned with false sweetness. We felt the disturbance, a soul from outside, untouched by our dark god's blessings. Such a rare delicacy. Surrender the newcomer, and we shall only enslave your world. Resist, and we shall make it a garden of delightful torments. Vex's expression remained ice-cold. I am Inquisitor Carmela Vex of the Ordo Malleus, speaking with the God Emperor's voice. Your presence here is heresy. Your existence is blasphemy. In his name, I condemn you to the void. Laughter echoed through the Vox, dozens of voices finding humor in her defiance. So much bravado from such tiny prey. Very well, we shall enjoy peeling your faith away layer by... The transmission cut as Vex activated the launch sequence. Fire, she said simply. The boarding torpedo screamed from Vigil's eye like a bullet from the Emperor's own bolter. Vader felt the acceleration crush him into the crash harness. 20, 30, 40 gravities that would have liquefied an unaugmented human. He drew on the Force, reinforcing his cybernetic body, keeping his organic parts from rupturing under the pressure. Through the viewport, the despoiler's fang grew from a distant silhouette to a massive wall of corrupted metal. Point defense turrets tracked him, spitting streams of explosive rounds. Las fire lanced through space. A plasma burst missed by meters, close enough that his torpedo's hull glowed cherry red from the thermal wash. Vader reached out through the Force, feeling the trajectory, the probability streams, the million possible futures. He nudged the torpedo left, down, spinning it through a gap in the defensive fire that existed for exactly half a second. The impact was violence made manifest. The torpedo punched through the despoiler's fang's hangar bay doors like a thunder hammer through parchment. It tumbled through the internal space, shedding armor plating and flames before slamming into a loading crane and finally grinding to a halt. Vader released the harness and kicked the hatch open before the metal had stopped screaming. The hangar was vast, easily 200 meters across, filled with corrupted fighter craft and boarding pods. And everywhere were the damned. Chaos cultists in patchwork armor, their flesh showing signs of mutation. Demon-possessed servitors twitching with unnatural life. And 30 Chaos Space Marines in black armor marked with the 8-pointed star, their ceramite plates fused with their twisted flesh. They all turned to stare at the smoking torpedo and the figure in black who emerged from it. "Intruder!" one of the Chaos Marines bellowed, his voice amplified by corrupted vox grills. "Kill the..." Vader raised his hand. The Space Marine flew backward, slammed into a bulkhead with enough force to leave a crater in the corrupted metal. His armor split like overripe fruit, and he slid down the wall, leaving a red streak. The hangar erupted into chaos. Las fire and bolt rounds filled the air in a storm of death. Vader ignited his lightsaber and moved, not charging, flowing, like water finding paths through obstacles. His blade intercepted bolt rounds mid-flight, deflecting them with impossible precision. His left hand gestured, and 3 cultists imploded as invisible force crushed their organs. A Chaos Marine charged with a chainsword screaming. Vader sidestepped, his lightsaber humming through the Marine's midsection. The Space Marine, transhuman warrior, gene-forged super soldier, fell in 2 pieces, his enhanced biology struggling to process bisection before death finally claimed him. "Psyker!" another Marine roared. "Focus fire! Overwhelm his..." Vader gestured, and a fighter craft tore free from its moorings. 20 tons of corrupted metal flew across the hangar like a thrown stone, crushing 6 Marines and 24 cultists. The survivors scrambled for cover, their tactics dissolving into individual survival instinct. This was what Vader had been made for. Not diplomacy, not politics, not governance, pure, focused violence against enemies who deserved no mercy. The Chaos Marines were transhuman, but he'd fought Jedi Masters, and won. The demons beginning to manifest were supernatural, but he'd touched the dark side's deepest depths and emerged stronger. He moved through the hangar like a force of nature, his lightsaber leaving trails of light, his force grip crushing anything that entered his peripheral vision. A possessed servitor lunged with hydraulic claws. He redirected its momentum, sent it crashing into its fellows. 3 Marines tried coordinated fire. He collapsed a support beam, buried them under tons of metal. In 90 seconds, the hangar was silent except for the dying and Vader's mechanical breathing. He accessed the hangar's control panel, his cybernetic interface adapting to the corrupted systems. The layout appeared in his mind. Bridge location, reactor chambers, life support. He plotted the fastest route, then severed the panel with his lightsaber to prevent pursuit tracking. The door to the interior corridors hissed open, revealing darkness lit by flickering red emergency lighting. Vader stepped through, and the despoiler's fang learned what it meant to be haunted by something darker than demons. Behind him, in the hangar, one surviving cultist whispered into his vox before Vader's lingering force grip crushed his throat. "He's coming," the cultist gasped. "The dark gods preserve us." He's coming. But the dark gods were busy watching with interest as this weapon from another universe carved his way deeper into their servant stronghold, and they found themselves genuinely uncertain which darkness would prove stronger. The corridors of the despoiler's fang were nightmares given architecture. Walls pulsed with organic tissue fused to corrupted metal, faces pressed against bulkheads from the inside, screaming silently. The air itself tasted of copper and rot, thick enough that Vader's respirator filters cycled audibly, struggling with atmospheric corruption his suit had never been designed to process. He moved through the darkness like a predator, his force senses extending ahead, reading the ship's layout through the terror of its inhabitants. 3 decks up, 2 corridors starboard. That's where the largest concentration of souls waited. The bridge crew, preparing their defenses. A squad of Chaos Marines rounded the corner, bolt weapons raised. Vader didn't break stride. His lightsaber swept through the first Marine's bolter, then through his chest. The second Marine fired. Vader caught the bolt round with the force, held it suspended inches from his mask, then reversed it back through the shooter's eye lens. The remaining 3 charged as one, chainsword screaming. Vader released a force push that sent them flying backward, their ceramite armor shrieking against the corridor walls. Before they could recover, he'd closed the distance. His lightsaber moved in precise, economical strikes, throat, heart, neck. 3 Chaos Marines dead in as many seconds. He continued forward, leaving corpses cooling in his wake. On the bridge, Champion Korthak, the despoiler, gripped the arms of his command throne with clawed gauntlets. He was massive even for a Chaos Marine, 3 meters of twisted muscle and corrupted ceramite, his armor decorated with the skulls of 13 Imperial saints. 800 years of service to the Dark Gods had transformed him into something barely human, his face a mass of scars and brass implants. "Status," he growled, his voice harmonizing with the demon bound inside his chest cavity. "He's killed 47 of our brothers," his lieutenant reported, ceramite fingers trembling on his data slate. 73 cultists. He's moving through the ship like nothing I've ever witnessed, my lord. The demonettes we released to slow him. He burned them with that energy blade before they could even manifest fully. Korthak had watched the hangar massacre through security feeds, before Vader destroyed the monitors. Watched this intruder move with precision that exceeded even Loyalist Astartes training. The energy weapon was unknown, but the telekinetic abilities suggested powerful psycho potential. "The Dark Gods whisper his name," Korthak said thoughtfully. "Vader, a weapon from beyond, untouched by chaos but saturated in darkness of a different vintage. They want him, want to taste what makes him strong, corrupt it, remake it in their image. Then we capture him. We try." Korthak stood, drawing his demon blade, a 2-handed sword that wept blood and whispered promises. "Assemble every warrior still functional. We make our stand here, on the bridge. Let him come to us. And when he arrives," the demon in his chest laughed, "we shall see if his darkness can withstand ours." Vader reached the bridge 3 minutes later, stepping over the bodies of Korthak's honor guard. The massive doors stood open, an invitation and a challenge. He entered without hesitation. The bridge was vast, a cathedral to corruption. 40 Chaos Marines formed a semicircle, weapons trained on the entrance. Behind them, cultist psychers chanted in languages that predated humanity, and at the center, seated on his brass throne, Champion Korthak waited with his demon blade resting across his knees. "Lord Vader," Korthak's voice boomed across the bridge, "the Dark Gods have sung your name in my dreams, a weapon of pure purpose, untainted by their blessings, strong in ways that fascinate them. Kneel, join us. Let chaos show you powers your dark side never imagined. Vader surveyed the assembled forces with mechanical calm. 40 Chaos Marines, a dozen Psychers, the champion himself radiating power that made the air shimmer. Any sane commander would retreat, regroup, call for reinforcements. But Vader had never claimed sanity. "I have faced your chaos before," he said, his lightsaber igniting with that distinctive snap hiss. "When I arrived, it touched my mind, offered power, whispered promises." He raised the crimson blade. "I refused then. I refuse now. I serve one master. There is no room in my soul for yours. Then you will die." Korthak rose, his demon blade screaming with unholy power. "Brothers, for the dark gods, for chaos eternal." The bridge erupted. Bolt rounds filled the air like rain. Vader's lightsaber became a blur of crimson light, deflecting shots with impossible precision. He reached out with the Force, grabbed an entire section of decking, and tore it upward like paper. 3 Marines fell through the gap into the deck below, their screams cut short. The cultist Psychers unleashed their powers, warp lightning, reality distortions, demonic summonings. Vader felt the attacks coming through the Force, saw the probability streams, and moved. The lightning scorched the space where he'd stood. The reality distortion folded empty air. The manifesting demon met his lightsaber before it could fully materialize, its essence burning away with a shriek that shattered monitoring equipment. He was among them now, his blade singing its lethal song. A Chaos Marine swung a power axe. Vader severed the weapon's haft, then the Marine's head. Another fired point blank. Vader caught him with the Force, lifted him into the air, and hurled him through the viewport into hard vacuum. "Impressive," Korthak's voice cut through the chaos, "but insufficient." The champion moved with speed that belied his bulk. His demon blade clashed against Vader's lightsaber, and sparks erupted. The dark energies of 2 different universes meeting in violent collision. They traded blows, Korthak's raw strength against Vader's precision, demon-forged steel against contained plasma. Vader reached out with the Force and felt something push back. The demon in Korthak's blade was fighting him, corrupting his telekinetic grip, making reality slip and twist around his power. "You see?" Korthak laughed, pressing his attack. "The warp does not bow to your Force. Here we are gods." But Vader had learned something in 3 days of studying this galaxy. The warp and the Force were different, yes, but darkness was universal. He stopped fighting the warp's nature and instead embraced it, let his rage flow through him, channeled every ounce of hate and pain and loss into one devastating Force push. Korthak flew backward, crashed through his command throne, and embedded in the wall behind it. His armor cracked, and the demon in his chest shrieked in confused pain as 2 forms of darkness collided inside its host. Vader advanced, his respirator cycling faster now, his movements fluid with dark purpose. The remaining Chaos Marines opened fire in desperation. He deflected their shots, crushed 3 with the Force, bisected 2 more with precise strikes. Korthak pulled himself from the wall, his armor sparking, half his face now exposed metal and raw flesh. "You cannot win." "I already have," Vader said simply. He reached out through the Force, found the massive viewing port behind Korthak, and shattered it. Explosive decompression turned the bridge into a hurricane. Cultists, servitors, loose equipment, everything not secured, flew toward the void. The Chaos Marines activated maglocks in their boots, but their lighter allies weren't so fortunate. Vader stood unmoved, his armor's systems compensating, his Force grip anchoring him to the deck. He watched Korthak struggle against the vacuum, watched the champion's demon blade tear free from his grip and tumble into space, watched 800 years of corruption finally meet its end. Then he turned and walked off the bridge, leaving Korthak to die screaming into the void. The champion's last thought before Vacuum claimed him was simple wonder. What kind of darkness creates something like that? The dark gods, watching through the warp, found themselves equally curious about the answer. Vader stood in the reactor chamber, his lightsaber reflecting off the pulsing warp core that powered the despoiler's fang. The reactor was an abomination, part machine, part demonic essence, part corrupted physics. It throbbed with sickly purple light, and faces appeared in its surface, screaming before dissolving back into energy. He raised his hand, feeling the structure through the force. Containment fields, plasma conduits, reality anchors holding the demon essence in check. All of it delicate, precisely balanced to prevent catastrophic failure. Vader clenched his fist. The containment fields collapsed. The plasma conduits ruptured. The reality anchors shattered. The warp core began its death scream, a sound that existed on frequencies mortal ears couldn't process, but souls could feel. He was already running. Behind him, the reactor chamber exploded in a cascade of failing systems. Purple fire, warp-tainted plasma that burned without heat, spread through the engineering decks. Demons bound into the ship's systems shrieked as their anchors dissolved. Metal groaned and twisted as reality reasserted itself against centuries of corruption. Vader reached the hangar in 47 seconds, his force-enhanced speed carrying him through collapsing corridors and past panicking cultists. The hangar was chaos, surviving crew scrambling for escape pods, fighters launching without clearance, servitors simply standing in place awaiting orders that would never come. He spotted a Chaos fighter craft, smaller than his tie, uglier, but intact. He force-pushed 3 cultists away from it, climbed into the cockpit, and ignited engines that screamed with barely controlled power. The fighter launched as the hangar bay doors buckled inward. Vader pushed the throttle to maximum, threading between explosions and debris. Behind him, the despoiler's fang was coming apart, its 3-kilometer hull breaking into burning fragments. The remaining 8 Chaos ships detected their flagship's destruction and reacted exactly as Vader predicted. They scattered. No coordination, no attempt at revenge, just pure survival instinct. They fled into the warp, leaving reality bleeding from their hasty departures. Vader angled toward Vigil's eye, broadcasting on Imperial frequencies. Inquisitor, the flagship is destroyed. The fleet is routed. Requesting docking clearance. There was a long pause. Then Vex's voice, colored with something that might have been awe or horror. Clearance granted. Hangar Bay 3. Welcome back, Lord Vader. 20 minutes later, Vader stood in Vex's sanctum, his armor scorched and pitted from explosive decompression. The Inquisitor circled him slowly, her augmetic eyes recording everything. You boarded a Chaos battle barge alone, she said quietly. Killed their champion, destroyed their flagship, routed 8 additional vessels. She stopped in front of him. The Grey Knights would call that a miracle. Space Marine chapters would compose sagas, and you did it in under 20 minutes. I did what needed doing, Vader said simply. The enemy was undisciplined, overconfident. They expected terror to paralyze their prey. They weren't prepared for someone who weaponizes fear as effectively as they do. Vex studied him for a long moment. Then she activated a hololith, showing tactical data from across the sector. The Mechanicus has extracted preliminary data from your ship. Your turbolaser technology alone would revolutionize Imperial naval doctrine. Your hyperdrive could end our dependence on the warp, and you... She gestured to him. You've just proven your combat value exceeds a company of Space Marines. I'm listening. I'm recommending to my superiors that you be granted provisional status as an inquisitorial agent. Not an inquisitor. You're not of our faith, and that matters. But an agent, authorized to act under inquisitorial authority on specific missions. She pulled up another display. In exchange, you'll have access to our archives. Everything we know about warp rifts, dimensional anomalies, reality breaches, every scrap of data that might help you find a way home. Vader considered this. It was manipulation. Tie him to the Imperium with access to knowledge, make him dependent on their cooperation. But it was also practical. He needed their resources, and they needed his capabilities. There are 14 sectors under inquisitorial jurisdiction in this region, Vex continued. 17 active Chaos incursions, 8 Orc wars, 3 Tyrannid splinter fleets, 2 worlds under exterminatus orders, and those are just the crises we know about. She met his gaze. The Imperium is dying, Lord Vader. Not today, not this year, but eventually. We're losing the long war, one system at a time. We need every weapon we can field. And if I refuse, then you remain here, a curiosity, while we continue dying without you. But you're a soldier. You understand duty. You've spent your life serving empires that wage forever wars. She leaned closer. So serve ours. Fight our battles. And when we've found what you need to go home, we'll let you leave with our gratitude and our technology. Vader felt the Force swirling with possibilities. Stay and fight. Become a weapon for this dying Imperium. Or refuse and remain purposeless, a blade without a hand to wield it. The choice was obvious. I accept, he said. On one condition, when I find a way home, you help me open the path, regardless of political consequences. I will return to my master. Agreed, Vex extended her hand. Welcome to the Inquisition, Lord Vader. The Emperor, whichever one you prefer, protects. Vader took her hand, felt the strength in her grip, the absolute conviction in her soul. She was dangerous, this woman. As dangerous as any Sith he'd known, which meant she'd be a valuable ally or a necessary enemy. He suspected he'd find out which soon enough. 6 weeks after his arrival, Vader stood in the Strategium aboard the inquisitorial strike cruiser Righteousness Unbound, studying a tactical display of the Gola's Nime system. The world hung in the hololith like a diseased pearl, a once verdant agri-world now showing purple veins of genestealer corruption spreading across its continents. 8 billion souls, Interrogator Matthias said beside him, his scarred face grim, all compromised. The cult of the four-armed emperor controls every major city. In 3 months, the Tyrannid hive fleet arrives, and they'll welcome it with open arms. Vader had studied the reports. The genestealers were insidious, alien parasites that infected humans at the genetic level, creating hybrid offspring that looked human but carried Xeno's DNA. By the 4th generation, the corruption was complete. The infected didn't even know they were compromised, believed themselves loyal Imperial citizens touched by divine blessing. Your exterminatus fleet, Vader observed, noting the 3 Navy vessels holding position at the system's edge. They'll use cyclonic torpedoes, atmospheric ignition, turning the planet into a burning rock. Standard protocol. Vex's voice came through the vox from her quarters, where she was consulting with her astropathic choir. Quick, relatively merciful. The infected die without suffering. Wasteful, Vader said flatly. Matthias turned to him, his augmetic arm whirring. Explain. 8 billion potential hostiles, all concentrated on one world. From a military perspective, that's not a problem. It's an opportunity. Vader manipulated the hololith, zooming in on the planet's orbital space. The Tyrannids will arrive expecting 8 billion bodies to consume, to process into biomass for their fleet. Instead, they find a lifeless rock and no reward for their journey. That's the point, Matthias said. Deny them resources. But you also deny yourselves information. Vader pulled up the projected Tyrannid arrival vector. The genestealers are in psychic contact with the incoming hive fleet. They're a living beacon guiding the Xenos directly here. If you kill them, the Tyrannids simply redirect to another target. But if you let them arrive, Let them commit to the assault. He traced attack patterns on the display. You can study them, learn their tactics, harvest their biotechnology, and eliminate a tendril of the Hive fleet in controlled conditions. Matthias stared at him. You're suggesting we let the Tyranids land, let them consume an entire world, just to observe them. I'm suggesting you transform a loss into a strategic victory, Vader corrected. Position your fleet in high orbit. Let the Tyranids commit their bioships to planetary assault. Then you destroy them while they're vulnerable, glutted on biomass, unable to flee quickly. His fist clenched. And you extract their technology, their genetic material, their weaknesses, knowledge that saves billions on the next world they attack. The tactical logic was sound, brutally so, but Matthias could see the moral weight. It meant letting 8 billion people die, knowing they could have been saved. Letting the Tyranids feast, using human suffering as bait. Inquisitor Vex needs to hear this. Matthias activated his Vox link. My lady, Lord Vader has proposed an alternative to immediate exterminatus. 10 minutes later, Vex stood in the strategium, her grey robe still smelling of incense from the astropathic chamber. She listened to Vader's proposal without interruption, her augmetic eyes calculating probabilities. You're advocating for strategic exterminatus, she said slowly. Let the infection run its course, use the corrupted as bait, then eliminate both Xenos threats simultaneously. Correct. The Ordo Xenos attempted something similar on Dalmark Prime 20 years ago. They let a Genestealer cult mature, planning to study the Tyranid response. The cult spread faster than predicted. The Hive fleet arrived early. 17 billion died before they could implement containment. Vex's expression was carved from ice. The Inquisitor who authorized it was executed for criminal negligence. Because they lost control, Vader said. I'm not suggesting you lose control. I'm suggesting you maintain orbital superiority, monitor the situation constantly, and have contingencies for every possible escalation. The moment it exceeds parameters, you glass the planet. But until then, he gestured to the hololith, you gather intelligence that could save entire sectors. Vex walked to the viewport, staring down at Golas Ninda's sickly purple continents. Vader's proposal was tactically sound, but morally monstrous. It transformed 8 billion people from victims to be mourned into strategic assets to be expended. It was exactly the kind of calculation she'd made 100 times before, but never with this level of cold precision. The people down there, she said quietly, they're already dead. The Genestealer infection is absolute. When the Tyranids arrive, they'll welcome consumption with joy, believing it's ascension to paradise. We're not saving them, we're choosing how they die. Then choose the death that serves the Imperium, Vader said without hesitation. Choose the death that turns 8 billion casualties into a weapon against future Xenos incursions. Make their deaths matter. Matthias looked between them, seeing two people who'd learned to calculate in corpses, who'd transformed atrocity into methodology. He'd served the Inquisition for 30 years, thought himself hardened to necessary evils. But this was something else. This was weaponizing suffering itself. If we do this, Matthias said carefully, if we let the Tyranids land, how do we ensure we can destroy them afterward? Their bioships are kilometers long, heavily armored, and they adapt quickly to threats. Vader manipulated the tactical display, highlighting the Tyranid arrival vector and orbital mechanics. Their bioships will enter low orbit to deploy ground forces. That's when they're vulnerable, committed to atmospheric insertion, unable to maneuver freely. You position lance batteries here, here, and here. He marked firing solutions. Concentrated fire on their propulsion organisms. Cripple them before they can withdraw. Then you have orbital targets that can't escape while you eliminate them systematically. And if they adapt, if they bring more ships than we can handle, then you implement exterminatus and accept the loss. But your intelligence suggests a splinter fleet. 6 to 8 bioships maximum. That's within your fleet's capacity to engage. Vader turned to face Vex directly. You want to stop the Tyranids? You need to understand them. Every hive fleet you destroy through attrition is replaced by 2 more. But if you learn their weaknesses, exploit their biology, turn their own adaptations against them. He let the implication hang. Vex made her decision with the same cold certainty that had defined her career. We proceed with Lord Vader's proposal, she said formally. Delay exterminatus, monitor the planetary situation, prepare orbital firing solutions, and document everything. Every Tyranid adaptation, every bioform deployed, every tactical response. This world dies, but its death will arm us for the next battle. Matthias bowed stiffly. As you command, Inquisitor, I'll inform the Navy vessels to maintain holding positions and prepare for prolonged engagement. After he left, Vex turned to Vader. You understand what we've just decided? 8 billion people will be consumed alive, torn apart by Tyranid bioforms, dissolved in digestion pools, transformed into ammunition and armor plating for the Hive fleet. I destroyed Alderaan, Vader said quietly. 2 billion dead in an instant to demonstrate Imperial power. Your 8 billion will at least serve a strategic purpose beyond simple terror. Does that make it better? No. His respirator cycled. But it makes it necessary. And in war, necessity absolves nothing, but it justifies everything. Vex studied him, seeing herself reflected in that black mask. 2 weapons shaped by their respective empires, 2 enforcers who'd learned that mercy was a luxury dying civilizations couldn't afford. The Emperor protects, she whispered. Which one? Vader asked. Their ritual now. Neither answered, because they both knew the terrible truth. In the grim darkness of the far future, no Emperor protected anyone. There was only survival, purchased with the bodies of those deemed expendable. And 8 billion souls on Golas 9 had just been added to that price. The Tyranid Hive fleet arrived exactly 73 days later, tearing through the system's edge like claws through flesh. 6 bioships, massive organic vessels that resembled deep-sea predators crossed with cosmic horrors. Each was kilometers long, their hulls covered in chitinous armor plates and weapon symbiotes that pulsed with bioluminescent hunger. Vader stood in the Righteousness Unbound's observation deck, watching through the viewport as reality bent around the approaching Xenos. Through the Force, he felt them, a vast, unified consciousness that made the Chaos whispers seem almost comprehensible by comparison. The Tyranids weren't evil or corrupt. They were simply hungry, a galactic-scale predator following its nature. Hive ships entering engagement range, the tactical officer reported. They're ignoring us completely, heading directly for Golas 9. Let them, Vex commanded from her throne. All vessels maintain position. Weapons cold. We're observers until they commit to planetary descent. On Golas 9, 8 billion infected souls looked to the sky with reverent joy. The Genestealer patriarchs broadcasting psychic hymns of welcome, 4 armed priests leading prayers of ascension. They believed salvation was descending from the stars. They were half right. The Tyranid bioships entered low orbit, their undersides splitting open to release spores. Millions of them, each containing warrior organisms designed for one purpose: harvest. They fell like rain, burning through the atmosphere in streams of bioluminescent fire. Vader watched the first spore impact in the capital city of Salvation Point. The armored shell cracked open and hormagaunts poured out. Bipedal killing machines with scything talons and instincts honed across 1,000 consumed worlds. They moved with insect precision, surrounding the celebrating crowds. The slaughter began immediately. The Genestealers and their hybrid children fought back, their forearms wielding industrial tools as weapons. But they were civilians, playing at soldiers, while the Tyranids were evolution's masterwork. Hormagaunts tore through crowds. Termagants provided covering fire with living weapons that spat flesh-boring beetles. And behind them, the larger creatures emerged. Carnifexes like living tanks, tyrannofexes with biocannons that launched explosive organisms. Recording everything, Magos Xerxes 7 reported from his analysis station. Mechadendrites plugged into every sensor array. Their coordination is perfect, no individual intelligence, but collective efficiency that exceeds our greatest tactical simulations. They're not fighting, they're processing. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. Then the harvesting began. Bio-titans descended from orbit, capillary towers that drove roots into the ground and began the digestion process. Bodies, buildings, vegetation, even the soil itself, everything was consumed, broken down into genetic material, and pumped back to the orbiting hive ships. The purple continents turned grey as life was stripped away, leaving only barren rock. Target bioships are glutted, the weapons officer reported. Their maneuvering profiles show reduced mobility. They're heavy with absorbed biomass. Are all ground forces recalled? Vex asked. Negative. Approximately 40% of deployed organisms remain planetside, continuing harvest operations. Vader studied the tactical display. The hive ships were vulnerable, bloated with fresh biomaterial, their attention focused downward on the ongoing harvest. It was the moment he'd predicted, when hunger overcame caution. Begin engagement, Vex commanded. All vessels, open fire. Target propulsion organs first, weapons second, then structural weaknesses. Lord Vader, you have tactical command. Vader's fingers moved across the hololith interface, designating targets with mechanical precision. Lance batteries. Concentrate fire on the lead bioship's rear propulsion cluster. Macro cannons. Suppress their spore chimneys. I want them unable to launch defensive organisms. Torpedo spread. Target the ventral armor plates where they're thinnest from harvest operations. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Lance beams, pure energy weapons drawing power from plasma reactors, lanced across the void. They struck the lead hive ship's propulsion organs, burning through chitin and muscle tissue. The bioship shuddered, its rear section erupting in bioluminescent ichor. It tried to turn, tried to bring its weapon symbiotes to bear, but its bloated state made it sluggish. Macro cannon shells, each the size of a hab block, hammered into its spore chimneys. The organic structures collapsed, their living ammunition dying before deployment. Torpedoes followed, punching through weakened armor and detonating inside the bioship's vital organs. The hive ship died slowly, thrashing in the void, hemorrhaging atmosphere and biofluid. Its death scream echoed through the psychic realm, a howl of hunger denied, of consumption interrupted. The remaining 5 bioships reacted with terrifying speed. They abandoned their harvest positions, their weapon symbiotes erupting with bioplasma and acid sprays. One of the Navy frigates took a direct hit. Its void shields collapsed, and acid ate through the hull in seconds. 300 crew died screaming as their ship dissolved around them. Evasive maneuvers, Vader commanded. Don't let them concentrate fire. Keep moving. Maintain distance. They're faster than they look, but we're more maneuverable. Use it. The void battle became a deadly dance. Imperial vessels weaving between bioplasma bursts, their lance batteries carving wounds in chitinous hulls. The Tyranids adapted mid-battle, their weapon symbiotes changing firing patterns, their armor plates shifting to present reinforced sections. But adaptation took time, and the Imperium's concentrated firepower was unrelenting. A second hive ship broke apart, its structural integrity failing after sustained lance fire. A third tried to flee, angling for the system's edge, but torpedo spreads crippled its propulsion. It hung dead in space, still alive, but unable to escape as macro cannons systematically demolished it section by section. 3 down, Vader reported. 3 remaining. They're attempting to regroup, present unified defense. Don't let them, Vex ordered. "Press the attack. We end this now." The Imperial fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The remaining hive ships fought with desperate ferocity, but they were already dying. Their harvest had been interrupted, their biomass gains insufficient to offset combat losses. The hive mind recognized failure and implemented its final protocol, self-destruction, to deny the enemy salvageable biotechnology. "They're overloading their digestive chambers," Xerxes 7 shrieked. "They're going to explode. All vessels, emergency withdrawal," Vader commanded. "Maximum burn. Get clear." The 3 hive ships detonated simultaneously, not explosions in the conventional sense, organic ruptures that released clouds of corrosive spores, acid rain, and genetic material designed to seed planets with tyrannid life. The expanding clouds consumed everything in their path, dissolving debris and void-hardened armor alike. The Imperial fleet burned away at emergency thrust, barely escaping the contamination zone. One Navy destroyer wasn't fast enough. The cloud caught its stern, and corrosive spores ate through the armor. Emergency bulkheads sealed, sacrificing 3 compartments and 40 crew to save the ship. When the clouds finally dispersed, 6 tyrannid bioships were gone. Golas 9 was a lifeless rock, stripped of everything organic, and the Imperial fleet hung victorious in the void, scarred but intact. "Total victory," Matthias said quietly, staring at the devastation. "We destroyed an entire tyrannid tendril, denied them a planet, saved future worlds from these specific organisms. At the cost of 8 billion souls," Vex added, "and 1 Imperial destroyer, and the knowledge that we let it happen. We chose this." Vader studied the barren planet below, feeling nothing through the Force. The life that had existed there was simply gone, processed, consumed, transformed into organic ammunition that had dissolved in hard vacuum. "Was it worth it?" Vex asked him directly. "Ask me in 50 years, Vader replied, "when the data Xerxes 7 collected prevents another hive fleet from consuming 10 worlds, when your officers use today's tactics to defeat tyrannids with fewer casualties, when the knowledge we gained here saves trillions." His respirator cycled. "Then we'll know if it was worth it." Vex turned away from the viewport, unable to look at the dead world any longer. "I need to file a report, justify our decisions to my superiors. They'll call this either brilliant strategic thinking or heretical negligence." "It was both," Vader said simply. "It always is." 3 months after Golas 9, Vader knelt in a meditation chamber aboard Vigil's Eye, surrounded by darkness and silence. The room was his. Vex had granted him private quarters where he could be alone with his thoughts and the Force. He reached out through the Force, searching as he'd done every day since his arrival, searching for anything familiar. A whisper of Palpatine's presence, a trace of Imperial space, some thread that connected him to the galaxy he'd left behind. Nothing. The Force showed him only this reality, the warp's constant pressure against existence, the dim psychic glow of humanity spreading across 1,000,000 worlds, and the vast hungry darkness between stars where Xenos threats waited. This was his reality now, perhaps forever. The door chimed. "Enter," Vader commanded. Inquisitor Vex stepped inside, carrying a data slate and an expression that suggested important news. "We've received word from the Ordo Malleus Conclave. Your actions at Golas 9 have been reviewed." Vader rose, his armor servos whirring. "And? You've been officially designated as an inquisitorial specialist, authorized to act under my direct authority. They've also granted access to the Librarium Daemonicus, our restricted archives on warp phenomena, dimensional breaches, and reality anomalies." She handed him the data slate. "Everything we know about travelers from beyond, entities that cross dimensions, and theories about the nature of the warp itself." Vader took the slate, his hope rising for the first time in months. How extensive are these archives? 10,000 years of documentation. Fragmentary, often contradictory, but comprehensive. Vex's augmetic eyes studied him carefully. Lord Vader, you should know, most entities that cross into our reality don't survive long. The warp corrupts, transforms, consumes. The fact that you've maintained coherence for 3 months is extraordinary, but the longer you remain, the greater the risk. Risk of what? Of the warp finding purchase in your soul. You claim the dark side protects you, that your corruption is complete and leaves no room for chaos. But the warp is patient. It probes for weaknesses, and every human has them. She stepped closer. I've witnessed Inquisitors with centuries of service fall to chaos in moments of weakness. Pride, despair, love, hate. Any strong emotion becomes a doorway. Your darkness may shield you, but it also makes you interesting to powers that should never notice mortals. Vader understood her warning. He'd felt it himself, the constant pressure of the warp, like whispers at the edge of hearing. 4 distinct presences, each offering different temptations. One promised martial perfection and eternal glory. Another offered forbidden knowledge and mastery of fate. A third whispered of sensations beyond imagining, pleasures that would make his pain meaningful. And the fourth simply wanted to watch him break, to transform his suffering into art. I am aware of the danger, Vader said, but I will not be corrupted. I have already fallen as far as any being can fall. There is no deeper darkness than what I've already embraced. Pride, Vex said softly. That's how the first whisper begins. The certainty that you're too strong, too disciplined, too far gone to be further corrupted. She placed her hand on his armored forearm, a gesture of warning and solidarity. I've watched stronger souls than yours succumb. Please be careful with these archives. The knowledge they contain has driven lesser minds to madness. I will take your warning seriously, Inquisitor. Vex nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. There's something else. A request, actually, from an unusual source. Explain. The Grey Knights chapter has heard of you. Space Marines specifically engineered to fight demons, incorruptible through genetic and psychic modification. Their Grand Master wants to meet you, to understand how a psyker from beyond resists chaos without their genetic advantages. Her expression was unreadable. It's an honor, Lord Vader. The Grey Knights rarely acknowledge outsiders, but it's also a test. They'll be evaluating whether you're an asset or a threat that needs elimination. Vader felt the Force shift. This meeting was important, a nexus point where futures diverged. When? 2 weeks, on Titan, their fortress monastery. You'd be the first non-Astartes allowed into their inner sanctum in 500 years. Vex met his gaze. They're the Imperium's ultimate weapon against chaos. If they determine you're compromised, they'll kill you, regardless of your service record or my authority. Are you willing to take that risk? Vader activated the data slate, scanning the Grey Knights' records. Elite warriors, each one a match for 10 normal space marines. Psychically attuned, demon killers, incorruptible. They were this galaxy's equivalent of Jedi, righteous warriors wielding supernatural powers for a cause they believed absolute. He'd killed Jedi by the hundreds. Perhaps it was time to see if these Grey Knights were any different. I accept, he said. Arrange the meeting. I'm curious to meet these incorruptible warriors. Vex's expression suggested she wasn't sure if that was confidence or arrogance speaking. Very well. I'll send word to Titan. And Lord Vader, the Grey Knights have fought demon princes who commanded legions. They've banished greater demons that could unmake planets with a thought. Don't underestimate them. I never underestimate anyone, Inquisitor. That's why I'm still alive. After she left, Vader returned to his meditation, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The archives might hold his path home. The Grey Knights might prove allies or enemies, and somewhere in the warp, 4 dark powers watched with growing interest as this weapon from beyond carved his legend into a galaxy that wasn't his own. The Force showed him futures, some where he returned to Palpatine triumphant, others where he fell to chaos corruption, still others where he became something new entirely. A dark champion for a dying Imperium, a weapon reforged in a different fire. He didn't know which future was real, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not die here, forgotten in an alien galaxy. He would find his way home, or he would make this galaxy remember his name. Either way, the 41st millennium had just learned what it meant to harbor a Sith Lord, and that lesson was far from over. Titan emerged from the warp storm like a fortress built from faith itself. The moon orbited Saturn in Vader's new reality, hidden behind psychic wards and void shields that made it invisible to all but the most powerful psychers. As the Inquisitorial shuttle descended, Vader studied the fortress monastery through his viewport, a cathedral citadel that sprawled across the grey surface, spires reaching toward the void like accusing fingers. The Grey Knights have called this place home for 10,000 years, Vex explained, standing beside him in full ceremonial armor. Every warrior here has slain demons. Every chamber is warded against chaos. The very stones scream hymns of the Emperor's glory. She glanced at him. Your presence here is unprecedented. Don't waste this opportunity. The shuttle landed in a bay lined with silver and red banners, each marked with the personal heraldry of Grey Knights who'd fallen in battle. Hundreds of them, thousands, stretching back millennia. Vader felt the weight of their sacrifice through the Force, souls given freely to hold back the darkness. It reminded him of the Jedi Temple, that same sense of righteous purpose, of warriors who believed absolutely in their cause. He'd burned one temple and slaughtered its defenders. Would history repeat itself here? Grand Master Voldus waited in the reception hall, a giant even among space marines, nearly matching Vader's height. His armor was Terminator pattern, layered ceramite plates inscribed with wards that hummed with psychic power. His face was weathered, scarred, and completely devoid of fear as he studied the Dark Lord. Lord Vader, Voldus's voice was thunder contained in flesh. You stand in the holiest place in the Imperium, untouched by the Emperor's light, but also uncorrupted by chaos. This should be impossible. Explain yourself. Vader met his gaze without flinching. I am a weapon forged in darkness, Grandmaster. The dark side of the Force claimed me completely before your warp ever touched my soul. There is no room for chaos because another corruption already dwells there. One corruption displacing another. Voldus circled him slowly, psychic senses probing. An interesting theory, but chaos is not content with partial claims. It demands total dominion or total destruction. You exist in violation of fundamental laws. I've spent my life violating laws, Vader replied. Physical, moral, spiritual, all are obstacles to be overcome through will and power. Your chaos whispers promises I've already fulfilled through the dark side. Why would I trade one master for 4? Voldus stopped his circling, his expression thoughtful. You speak of masters, of service and submission, yet you claim strength. Which is it, Lord Vader? Are you powerful, or are you enslaved? The question cut deeper than any blade. Vader had asked himself the same thing countless times in the dark hours between missions. Was he Palpatine's enforcer by choice, or was he simply too broken to imagine another existence? I am both, he answered with brutal honesty. I am powerful enough to destroy worlds, yet bound by loyalty to an emperor who rebuilt me from broken pieces. Power and servitude are not opposites, Grandmaster. They are different faces of the same coin. Interesting. Voldus gestured, and a door opened behind him. Walk with me. I wish to show you something. They descended into the fortress monastery's depths, past training halls where Grey Knights practiced demon-killing techniques, past libraries where forbidden knowledge sat under lock and ward, past meditation chambers that thrummed with psychic power. Vex followed at a respectful distance, her hand never far from her bolt pistol. They reached a vault sealed with wards so powerful that Vader's armor sparked in proximity. Voldus placed his palm on the gene lock, and the door ground open with hydraulic hisses. Inside was a chamber lined with stasis fields. Each contained a weapon, demon blades, cursed artifacts, chaos relics that pulsed with malevolent energy. But at the chamber's center stood something different, a simple black cube, perfectly smooth, unmarked by any symbol or script. "We recovered this from the Halo stars," Voldus explained. 5,000 years ago, during a campaign against reality-bending Xenos. It predates the Imperium, possibly predates humanity itself, and it does something we still don't understand. It creates barriers against the warp. Vader approached the cube, feeling its presence through the Force. It was cold, empty, a void where energy should exist. Not dark side, not light, not warp, simply absence. "We've theorized that it comes from a universe where the warp doesn't exist," Voldus continued, "where psychic energy operates under different principles, like yours, perhaps, your Force." Understanding crystallized in Vader's mind. "You brought me here to compare, to see if my immunity to chaos stems from a similar source." "Precisely." Voldus gestured to a nearby cogitator array. "Our librarians have studied you from afar, analyzed your psychic signature through remote sensors. Your power doesn't draw from the warp. It's self-contained, like this cube. You're a closed system, taking nothing from the immaterium and giving nothing back. Which makes me useless to chaos," Vader finished. "They can't feed on me because I don't leak psychic energy. Can't corrupt me because my power doesn't flow through them. I'm simply incompatible. For now," Voldus warned. "But prolonged exposure changes things. The warp is corrosive. Given enough time, it finds cracks in any armor, weaknesses in any soul, even yours." Vader studied the cube, seeing his reflection in its perfect surface. A dark figure, armored against a hostile universe, powerful but isolated. It was an apt metaphor. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Why reveal a strategic asset to an outsider?" Voldus's expression shifted, becoming almost respectful. "Because you're not an outsider, Lord Vader. You're something rarer, a kindred soul from beyond. You understand the burden of being a weapon, of carrying power that others fear. And I believe you can help us." "Help you how?" "The warp grows stronger. Chaos incursions increase yearly. Demon breaches that once happened once per century now occur monthly. The Imperium is losing ground." Voldus placed his hand on Vader's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity between warriors. "But you represent something chaos hasn't encountered before, a form of power they can't corrupt, can't predict, can't counter with their usual tactics. You're an anomaly, and anomalies win wars when properly deployed. You want me to become a weapon against chaos specifically. I want you to be what you already are, a dark mirror held up to darkness itself. Show the ruinous powers that corruption can be resisted. That power exists outside their influence, that their victory is not inevitable." Voldus stepped back. "And in exchange, the Grey Knights will aid your search for home. Our librarians will study dimensional theory, analyze your arrival, research methods to breach reality itself. If anyone in this galaxy can return you to your master, it's us." Vader felt the Force swirling with possibility. The Grey Knights possessed resources even the Inquisition couldn't match. Psychic warriors who understood the warp's deepest mysteries, libraries containing knowledge from before the Imperium's founding, technology specifically designed to combat reality itself. What would this service entail? "Accompanying our strike forces on demon hunting missions. Your presence disrupts chaos in ways we're still documenting. Warp entities that manifest near you show confusion, as if you're a blind spot in their perception. Voldus activated a hololith, showing combat footage. This is from your engagement aboard the Despoiler's Fang. Watch the demonette manifestations closely. Vader watched himself fighting through the Chaos ship. When demons tried to manifest near him, they flickered, struggled, sometimes failed to materialize entirely. His Force presence was actively disrupting their connection to reality. "You're a natural demon repellent," Voldus said with grim satisfaction. "A weapon we desperately need. So I ask formally, Lord Vader, will you fight beside the Grey Knights? Will you turn your darkness against chaos itself?" The irony wasn't lost on Vader. The Jedi had believed he'd bring balance to the Force. Instead, he'd slaughtered them and helped destroy everything they'd built. Now, in a different galaxy, different warriors with similar purpose were asking him to be their champion. Perhaps this time he could actually fulfill his destiny. "I accept," Vader said, "on the condition that your librarians prioritize research into my return. Every demon I banish, every chaos incursion I disrupt, brings me closer to finding my way home." "Agreed?" Voldus extended his massive, gauntleted hand. "Agreed. Welcome to the war, Lord Vader. The Emperor, yours and ours, will witness what darkness can achieve when properly aimed." They shook hands, two weapons acknowledging each other, and Vader felt the Force shift definitively. This was his path now, at least for the foreseeable future, fighting beside incorruptible warriors against a threat that consumed galaxies. It wasn't the Empire he'd known, but it was a war worth fighting, and wars were the only thing Darth Vader had ever truly understood. The Demon Prince materialized on the plague world of Mortis 7 like a nightmare given flesh. 15 meters tall, its body a fusion of rotting meat and impossible geometries, bearing 7 eyes that wept acidic tears and a mouth filled with teeth that had once been souls. It served Nurgle, the chaos god of decay, and it had corrupted 3 systems before the Grey Knights tracked it here. Vader stood in the deployment bay of the strike cruiser Titan's Wrath, surrounded by 30 Grey Knights preparing for battle. Their armor shone silver in the bay's lighting, stormbolters mag-locked to their thighs, Nemesis Force weapons thrumming with psychic power. Each warrior was a veteran of 100 demon kills, their souls armored with faith and genetics against corruption. "The target has manifested in the northern plague wastes," Brother Captain Stern reported, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "It's spawning lesser demons, corrupting reality in a 2-kilometer radius. Standard deployment. Thunderhawk insertion. Establish perimeter, then breach and banish." "What's my role?" Vader asked. Stern turned to him, his helmeted face unreadable. "Stay close to me. Your presence disrupts warp manifestations, makes banishment easier. But demon princes are cunning. It'll target you specifically once it realizes what you are. Don't engage alone." "I've fought worse than demons. Have you fought something that exists partially outside reality? Something that can reshape the laws of physics within its domain? Something that gets stronger the more you fear it?" Stern's tone wasn't challenging, just factual. "Demon princes aren't enemies, Lord Vader. They're natural disasters wearing flesh. Respect them, or they'll teach you respect the hard way." The Thunderhawk gunship roared through Mortis 7's toxic atmosphere, its armored hull shaking from turbulence and demonic interference. Through the viewport, Vader watched the landscape transform from merely dead to actively hostile. Trees made of bone, rivers of pus, the sky itself bleeding reality where the demon's presence was strongest. They landed 300 meters from the corruption's epicenter, the Grey Knights deployed in perfect formation, stormbolters raised, psychic wards glowing around each warrior. Vader ignited his lightsaber, its crimson blade standing out against the grey armor like a drop of blood on silver. "Advance!" Stern commanded. "Holy formation, weapons hot. Emperor, guide our blades. They moved through the plague wastes in disciplined silence. Lesser demons, plague-bearers with rotting flesh and single horns, shambled toward them with weapons made from infected bone. The Grey Knights opened fire, their storm bolters spitting blessed rounds that burned demon flesh like acid. Vader moved with them, his lightsaber carving through plague-bearers before they could close. He felt it then, the demon prince's attention turning toward him. A massive psychic weight, like being observed by something vast and hungry. Through the Force, he sensed its confusion. The demon couldn't read him properly, couldn't understand what he was. "It's noticed you," Stern said, his psychic senses detecting the same thing. "Prepare for direct assault." The ground erupted. The demon prince rose from beneath the corrupted soil, its massive form blocking out the bleeding sky. It roared, and the sound was more than noise. It was a psychic assault, a wave of despair and decay meant to break mortal minds. 3 Grey Knights staggered, their wards flaring as they resisted. Vader felt the attack wash over him uselessly, his dark side corruption-proof against Nurgle's gifts. "Spread out," Stern commanded. "Concentrated fire, Nemesis protocols." The Grey Knights attacked with coordinated precision. Storm bolters hammered the demon's flesh, opening wounds that leaked diseased ichor. Nemesis Force weapons, blessed blades channeling psychic power, carved through its limbs. Stern himself wielded a Nemesis Force halberd, the blade burning with silver fire as it struck the demon's chest. The demon prince laughed, a sound like cities drowning in filth. Its wounds closed as fast as they opened, flesh regenerating through impossible biology. It swung one massive arm, catching 2 Grey Knights and sending them flying. They crashed through corrupted trees, their armor cracked but their faith unbroken. "Banishment ritual," Stern ordered. "Cover the librarian." A Grey Knight's librarian stepped forward, his Force staff glowing with building power. He began chanting in High Gothic, words of banishment that resonated through the warp. The demon prince felt it, turned toward him, raised a hand to crush the psyker before he could finish. Vader struck. He'd been studying the demon's movements, reading its patterns through the Force. When it focused on the librarian, he saw the opening. His lightsaber flashed, severing 3 of the demon's fingers. The demon prince screamed, not in pain, but in shock. That blade shouldn't have worked so effectively, shouldn't have cut through warp-enhanced flesh like it was ordinary matter. "What are you?" the demon demanded, its voice echoing from 7 mouths. "You're not of this reality, not touched by the gods, not natural." "I'm your executioner," Vader replied simply. He reached out with the Force and grabbed the demon by its throat, not physically, but through its essence. The demon thrashed, trying to shift into the warp, to escape into unreality. But Vader's grip was different from psychic attacks it had faced before. This wasn't warp energy it could counter. This was something else entirely. "Now," Vader commanded. The librarian completed his banishment ritual. Silver flames erupted around the demon prince, true fire that burned its essence rather than its flesh. Combined with Vader's Force grip holding it in reality, unable to flee, the demon found itself trapped between 2 incompatible forces. "Impossible!" it shrieked. "The grandfather protects, his blessings." The banishment completed. The demon prince exploded into diseased smoke, its essence torn apart and cast back into the warp. The corruption around them began to fade, reality reasserting itself as the demonic anchor shattered. The bleeding sky sealed, the bone trees crumbled to dust, the rivers of pus evaporated. Silence fell over the plague wastes. Stern approached Vader slowly, his nemesis halberd still active. "That shouldn't have worked. Demon princes can phase into the warp when threatened. But you held it here, in reality, while we banished it. How?" My force grip doesn't work through the warp, Vader explained. I'm manipulating its physical form directly, through principles your demons don't understand. To them, I'm a blind spot, power they can't detect or counter. The Grey Knights exchanged glances. They'd just witnessed something unprecedented. A demon prince defeated not through faith or psychic mastery, but through an entirely different form of power. A weapon chaos had no defense against. This changes everything, Stern said quietly. If you can hold demons in reality while we banish them, we can eliminate targets we've been hunting for centuries. Greater demons that normally flee before we finish rituals. Demon princes that escape to the warp when threatened. He turned to face Vader fully. You're not just immune to chaos, Lord Vader. You're actively harmful to it. You're a weapon we've needed for 10,000 years. Vader felt the Force confirming it. This was his purpose in this galaxy, not to replace Palpatine, not to build a new empire, but to become something simpler and more direct. A blade pointed at chaos itself, fighting a war that never ended because neither side could afford surrender. Then use me, Vader said. Point me at your enemies. I will demonstrate what happens when darkness fights darkness. The Grey Knights knelt, a gesture of respect between warriors. Even Stern, proud veteran of centuries of demon hunting, bowed his head to acknowledge what Vader had become. A weapon without equal, a dark champion for an Imperium desperate for hope. And somewhere in the warp, the four Chaos gods felt something they rarely experienced: concern. 6 months had passed since Vader's arrival in the 41st millennium. He stood now in the Librarium Demonicus, aboard Titan, surrounded by 6 Grey Knights librarians who'd spent those months studying his nature, documenting his effect on the warp, and researching dimensional transit. Chief Librarian Hyperion, ancient even by Space Marine standards, laid a crystalline data slate on the table between them. His weathered face bore the scars of 3 centuries fighting demons, but his eyes held something Vader hadn't seen before: cautious optimism. We've made progress, Hyperion said, his voice gravelly with age. Your arrival created a signature in the warp, a wound where your universe intersected ours. It's healing, collapsing, but slowly. If we can reopen it, create a stable corridor. He gestured to complex calculations on the hololith. Theoretically, you could return. Vader felt something stir in his chest. Hope, dangerous and painful. Theoretically. The challenges are substantial, another librarian interjected. Reopening the rift requires astronomical amounts of energy, more than any ship, any forge world, any battle station could generate. We'd need power on the scale of a star. The Necrons have such technology, a third librarian added. Their celestial orrery can manipulate stars themselves, but accessing it would require... He trailed off. Impossible odds, Vader finished. I'm familiar with those. Hyperion leaned forward. There's another complication. The rift that brought you here, it was random, uncontrolled. Creating a deliberate portal requires precise calculations, perfect timing, and psychic anchors on both sides, without someone on the other end to guide the connection. He spread his hands helplessly. My master, Vader said with absolute certainty. Emperor Palpatine. He's the most powerful Force user in galactic history. If I can send a signal, establish any kind of connection, he'll feel it. He'll reach back. That's our theory, Hyperion agreed. But Lord Vader, you must understand. The energy required, the risks involved, the potential for catastrophic failure. We're talking about deliberately tearing a hole between realities. If it goes wrong, both universes could be damaged. Demons could pour through the breach, or worse things from dimensions we can't even conceptualize. Vader studied the calculations, his cybernetic brain processing the mathematics. It was possible, barely, but would require resources the Imperium didn't casually deploy. It would require convincing the High Lords of Terror that opening a dimensional rift was worth the risk. It would require allies, favors, and political maneuvering that Vader had spent decades mastering. Before he could respond, alarms shrieked through Titan. "Warp breach in the Sol system," a voice screamed over Vox channels. "Massive corruption signature. Chaos fleet emerging. It's the Despoiler. Abaddon the Despoiler is attacking Terra itself." Every Grey Knight in the Librarium was moving before the message finished. They drilled for this scenario, the nightmare assault, chaos striking at humanity's heart. Hyperion grabbed his Nemesis Force sword, already barking orders into his Vox. "All chapters, full deployment. This is not a drill. Terra is under siege." Vader followed them to the deployment bays, his mind racing. Abaddon the Despoiler. The legends said he was the greatest Chaos champion, commander of the Black Legion, a warrior who'd launched 13 Black Crusades against the Imperium. And now he was attacking Terra, where the Emperor himself sat upon the Golden Throne. The irony wasn't lost on Vader. He'd spent 6 months fighting for this Imperium, and now he'd face its greatest enemy in defense of an Emperor who wasn't his own. Grandmaster Voldus met them in the bay, already armored in his personal Terminator plate. "Lord Vader, the Despoiler's forces outnumber us 5-1. They have demon princes, chaos titans, and weapons that reality itself fears. This will be the hardest battle you've faced in our galaxy." "Then it will be exactly what I trained for," Vader replied, his lightsaber ready. They deployed via teleportation, a Grey Knight's technology that punched through reality itself. One moment, Vader stood in Titan's Bay. The next, he materialized in the void above Terra, surrounded by the largest space battle he'd witnessed since the Clone Wars. Hundreds of ships locked in deadly combat, Imperial Navy vessels firing lance batteries and macro cannons, Chaos fleets responding with demonic weapons that warped space itself, and in the center, massive beyond comprehension, a Chaos battleship that dwarfed everything around it. The Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon's flagship. "Our target is the flagship," Voldus transmitted. "If we kill Abaddon, the Black Legion loses cohesion. Standard boarding action, but expect everything. The Despoiler has fought for 10,000 years. He doesn't lose." Vader studied the Vengeful Spirit through his viewport. It was corruption made manifest, a ship that had witnessed the Imperium's birth and spent millennia trying to destroy it. Taking it would be suicide. Perfect. "I'll lead the assault," Vader said simply. "Impossible. You're not Astartes, not enhanced beyond human. I'm something better," Vader interrupted. "I'm a weapon Chaos can't comprehend. They'll focus on me, try to understand what I am. Use that distraction. Hit them while they're confused." Voldus studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Very well. The Emperor protects Lord Vader. Both of them." The boarding torpedo launched, and Vader felt the force surging around him. This was it. The culmination of 6 months fighting in a galaxy not his own. Win here, and he'd proven his worth beyond question. The Imperium would move stars to return him home. Lose, and Terra fell, taking humanity's heart with it. The torpedo punched through the Vengeful Spirit's corrupted hull, and Vader emerged into a nightmare worse than anything he'd faced. The ship's interior was alive, walls pulsing with demonic essence, floors covered in teeth that tried to bite his boots, air thick with whispers promising power and damnation. He ignited his lightsaber and advanced into the darkness. Behind him, Grey Knights teleported in, their silver armor blazing with holy light. Around him, Chaos Marines and demons converged like antibodies attacking an infection. And somewhere ahead, in the ship's corrupted heart, Abaddon the Despoiler waited, a warrior who'd never been defeated, commanding forces that had broken entire sectors. Vader smiled behind his mask. Finally, a challenge worthy of his power. Finally, a battle that would test everything he'd become. The Force showed him victory and defeat in equal measure, futures balanced on a blade's edge. But Vader had spent his life defying probability, turning certain death into unlikely survival. He reached out with the Force, grabbed a corrupted bulkhead, and tore it free. 20 tons of corrupted metal flew down the corridor, crushing dozens of Chaos Marines. The survivors stared in shock. This shouldn't be possible. This power operating without warp energy, this darkness that their gods couldn't touch. "I am Lord Vader." His mechanical voice boomed through the ship, amplified by Vox systems he'd seized with the Force. "Right hand of Emperor Palpatine, I have destroyed fleets, conquered systems, and slaughtered warriors who believed themselves invincible. Abaddon the Despoiler, I am coming for you, and when we meet, you will learn what true darkness looks like." The challenge echoed through the vengeful spirit, reaching Abaddon in his throne room. The Despoiler stood, ancient armor creaking, and smiled with anticipation. Two dark weapons were about to collide, two servants of different emperors, two champions of incompatible darknesses. The galaxy would remember this battle, and one of them wouldn't survive it. The duel lasted 17 minutes. Abaddon the Despoiler, wielder of the Talon of Horus, veteran of 10,000 years, met Vader in the ship's corrupted throne room. Their clash shook reality itself, demonic blade against lightsaber, warp-enhanced strength against Force mastery, ancient chaos champion against a Sith Lord from beyond. They were equals in violence, in conviction, in the absolute certainty that their cause justified any atrocity. But Vader possessed one advantage Abaddon couldn't counter. He had nothing left to lose, no home to return to with certainty, no master who might welcome him back, no future beyond the war itself. He fought with the desperation of someone who'd lost everything twice and refused to lose a third time. When Vader's lightsaber finally pierced Abaddon's corrupted heart, the Despoiler's last words were almost respectful. "You're not of this galaxy, but you belong to this war." Then he died, and the Black Legion fled in disarray, their 10,000-year legend shattered by a weapon they'd never anticipated. 3 weeks later, Vader knelt before the Golden Throne itself, granted an audience few mortals ever received. The Emperor of Mankind sat entombed in machinery that kept his decaying body alive, his psychic presence blazing like a star even Vader's Force senses could barely withstand. A whisper touched Vader's mind, not words, but understanding. The Emperor had seen what he was, recognized him as a kindred darkness-made weapon, and approved. More than that, the Emperor showed him a vision, a possibility, a path that might lead home. But the price would be everything Vader had left. Grand Master Voldus explained it simply. The Emperor can create the rift, but he needs an anchor on the other side, someone powerful enough to tear reality from within. Your master, this Palpatine, if he's truly as strong as you claim, the Emperor can reach across dimensions. But once the portal opens, you'll have seconds to cross, and there's no guarantee what you'll find on the other side. Your galaxy might have moved on. Years, decades, centuries might have passed while you've been here. Vader didn't hesitate. Do it. The ritual took place in Terra's orbit, aboard a specially prepared vessel filled with Grey Knights, librarians, and Inquisitors. Vader stood at the center of a psychic circle, feeling the Emperor's vast power building around him. The warp screamed in protest as reality itself began to tear. And then, contact. Across dimensions, across universes, Vader felt it. Palpatine's presence. His master, reaching back. Dark power answering dark power. The portal stabilized, a wound in space showing glimpses of Imperial Star Destroyers, of a familiar galaxy, of home. "Go," Voldus commanded. "Before it collapses." Vader stepped toward the portal, then paused. He He turned back to face the warriors who'd fought beside him, the Imperium that had given him purpose when he'd lost everything. "The Emperor protects," he said simply. "Both of them." "May you find what you seek, Lord Vader," Vex replied, her augmetic eyes recording his departure. "And may your darkness serve justice, wherever you wield it." Vader walked into the portal, reality folding around him, dimensions shifting. Behind him, the 41st millennium collapsed back into itself, the rift healing, the connection severed. He emerged in familiar space, aboard the Executor, Palpatine's presence washing over him like acid and salvation combined. "Lord Vader," his master's voice crackled through his communicator. "You've been gone for 17 minutes. I felt you vanish, felt something tear you away. Explain." 17 minutes in his galaxy, 6 months in theirs. Time operated differently between dimensions. Vader looked at his hands, felt the changes the 41st millennium had carved into his soul. He'd fought demons and Xenos. He'd seen an Imperium that made Palpatine's empire look merciful. He'd discovered that darkness came in infinite variations, and his wasn't the deepest. "I saw the future, Master," Vader said carefully. "A possible future, where humanity survives against impossible odds through faith and brutality, where the galaxy drowns in war, and only the ruthless endure." "And what did you learn?" Vader considered the question. He'd learned that weapons could serve multiple masters, that darkness fighting darkness could achieve strange victories, that sometimes the monster was exactly what civilization needed to survive. "I learned that the empire you're building, our empire, must be stronger, more disciplined, more willing to make the hard choices." He met Palpatine's holographic gaze. "I learned that in the grim darkness of possible futures there is only war, and we must prepare for it, Master, before that future becomes ours." Palpatine smiled, that knowing expression that suggested he'd planned this lesson all along. "Then let us begin, Lord Vader. Let us forge an empire that will endure 10,000 years. And let us ensure that when darkness comes, as it always does, we are the greater darkness." Vader bowed his head in acknowledgement, but part of him remained in that other galaxy, with warriors in silver armor who fought without hope of victory, with an Inquisitor who'd understood what he was and used him anyway, with a dying Imperium that survived through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to surrender. He would remember them, and when the darkness came to his galaxy, and it would, eventually, he'd remember what he'd learned, that monsters could be heroes if aimed correctly, that darkness could serve light in its own twisted way, and that in any universe, any reality, any possible future, the Emperor protects. Even when the Emperor himself is a weapon wearing a crown, the Emperor protects. More stories await.